video gaming.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Jeff Gerstmann Show. I'm Jeff Gerstmann here with you. It is still September. It is September 20th today, 2022. In case you're listening to this in the far-flung future and you're like, that doesn't really narrow it down for me, all this other stuff. We are still in the year 2022 somehow. And it's a pleasure to be with you on this fine morning on a bevy of platforms, not necessarily live, but after the fact, this is beaming out. So if you're with us here live here on twitch.tv/Jeff Gerstmann, hello, hi, everyone in the chat over here, on the Discord over here. We got everybody. You want to move from here to here? If you want to get on this Discord, you can head over to patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann, and you can sign up. You get access to an ad-free version of this show. As well as bonus content. The next episode of Game Boys to Men has been recorded for people at the $10 tier. You can get access to that, and that's Glenn Rubenstein and I walking down a memory lane that is about to take a dark turn, because we finally reached the point here where we talk a lot about the Sega CD in this episode and our weird fondness. No, maybe it's not weird. Our fondness for the platform. And what it was like to go and see that stuff before it was out, and you know, a lot of Night Trap talk in this episode for sure. That'll be hitting later this week, and then we're up to a point now where next time we're going to talk about being. I think he was 15 and I was 16, and we went to Chicago for the first time for the Consumer Electronics Show, and then how 6 months after that we went to Las Vegas, still age 16. I would have been 17 at that point. My birthday would have happened anyway. So it's about to take a dark turn of teenagers on the road. And I don't know. We'll see where it goes from here. This might be the last good, pure episode, and I feel like after this, it flies off the rails, and then suddenly we're swearing in front of children on a stage, and all sorts of stuff like that. So Game Boys to Men, you can get access to that over on the Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. A couple of kind souls have registered domains to point to that. So if you can't figure out how to spell my name, I get it. You can go to enjoyyourgaming.com or dopeassvideogames.com. I think they'll both get you there. Or maybe you're watching the show over on YouTube. These videos from Twitch do get archived over on YouTube. And you can get there by going to guard.bike. That's probably the fastest thing you can type to get there. It's stream archives of the podcast, all that sort of stuff shows up over there. So that is the breadth and depth of the Jeff Gerstmann universe, I suppose. What's going on in the universe? A couple of big things here this morning. One, I bought my wife just decided that I needed to have this in my life. She bought this. It's a coffee drink, so it's not like a pure energy beverage, but it is 300 milligrams, and it is what is this? The Black Rifle Coffee Company, which just feels like the most NRA ass. Like, no, call it Black Rifle because that's what they're scared of. I don't know. Serving coffee and culture to people who love America. 300 natural caffeine, 300 milligrams of freedom fuel. This stuff looks like it absolutely sucks. I don't know. Let's try it. Let's try it out. These people are bad people? Yeah, I bet. You can tell from the can that these people are bad fucking people. Oh, that tastes like shit. What the fuck? Bah. What? Ah. Ha. Okay. Well, you know, I mean, again, my wife, you know, my wife is on the hunt for drinks that she hasn't seen before. So she's always out there picking up stuff, and that she thinks might be a good, you know, something I haven't tried before. So we rank it on the list. This is what she picked up. I might not actually finish this. It's like, I mean, there's a vague coffee taste to. Oh man, ugh. It's like a coffee. It is some of the worst coffee. Yeah, that tastes like fucking trash. Holy shit. Try one more sip here. It's like it's like there's a chemical. Oh god damn. Fuck this. Fuck this. It's like a coffee flavor, and then there's a weird sweet chemical on it that is like absolute shit. What the fuck? Why would motherfuckers sell this? I guess because when you're selling it under the guise of like, this is what gets America going, then I guess you're probably going to sell to a collection of people who are just like, no, it's good that it tastes bad. I don't know. It's, well, that sucks shit. Wow. Okay. Let's, what else is going on? I bought a Flipper Zero. And this is it. This is the Flipper Zero. If you're watching the video, you can see. And this thing's pretty cool. It's very silly. It is a well, it can read and write frequencies. Basically, is the basic idea here. So you can take, for example, your garage door remote or the remote to your HDMI switcher, and you can play it into the device and it will record it and play it back. And basically that means you can clone your garage door opener. You can clone like a lot of security badges that open doors and stuff like that. So it'll do RFID tags. So it'll do NFC tags. So if you had something like an amiibo, for example, you can clone that sort of stuff. Car keys are a little bit tricky because car keys use rolling frequencies, and so it's not as simple as just like replaying the same thing over and over again. And so it's a little bit more complicated. I have seen that there's the official firmware, which only handles certain things, and then there's a couple of branches of the firmware that are a little looser in terms of just like, yeah, man, if you want to don't break the law. Don't go broadcasting on these frequencies because that's definitely illegal. And all that sort of stuff. And so, but it's like this very fun, like it's got this weird Tamagotchi vibe to it. I don't know if you can, I'll try to light it up. And it's got a friendly dolphin that shows up on the screen. And that dolphin is out here recording as it's spying on me. He's recording signals, all that other stuff. And it levels up. Mine is still level 1 because I haven't done much with it, but you scan different tags and all this other stuff. One of the fun videos you've seen, maybe have seen going around, there's a couple of them, but I guess like the thing is, this doesn't commit the crime all by itself, because you can't just tell it to emulate a universal RFID tag and then hold it up to any door and automatically open it. And there are like videos on TikTok going around of the Flipper Zero in action, and it's always like, it's a universal door key. And then it's just like, someone holding it up to a door and it opening up. They leave out the part where it's like, yeah, you have to have like physical access or you have to have access to the card itself. Or, I mean, you can copy, once you've cloned something, it has an SD card slot on it. So you can just, you can copy those things around. But you have to have physical access to the card. So you still have to pull an op to get your hands on someone's security badge, You still have to like fucking find out where the janitor goes for drinks at lunch and then hope he's, like just isn't looking for a minute so that you can look down at his key ring and see his card on it, hold this thing down near it just long enough to copy it. and then maybe you can, gain physical access to a building, all that sort of stuff. One of the other things, though, car keys are a little tricky. I've seen some people unlock car doors with it. There's been videos of that stuff going around, but I've not been able to get it to clone my car keys, which is all I've tried. But apparently the frequencies used by Teslas on their charging door, like the fuel door on the back of it that'll pop up, apparently that frequency is pretty standard. And so you can just go on GitHub and there's a full repo full of saved frequencies, and it'll do rolling, like not rolling, but it'll do, you can set it up so if you have like a range of frequencies you want to try over and over again, you can just push the button and it'll cycle through them, which is kind of cool. But there are good videos going around of people basically popping the fuel doors on Teslas like from a distance and shit like that, and drivers and people outside the car looking like, going, whoa, whoa, and closing the thing and open it up again. Yeah, it's so that's pretty good. One of the other things I saw on GitHub that I have not tried is using it to change the prices on at gas stations, not on the pumps themselves, obviously, but I guess the electronic signs at gas stations are controlled via a simple remote, and that people have found a bunch of these over the year, figured out the frequencies for a lot of them, and so they've just rolled them into one thing, and you just push the button, and apparently it eventually works. I have not tried that. They've got some universal garage door things, which those existed before. You used to be able to find those online. It's like, here's a universal garage door opener. Don't steal shit. And I'd look at it and go like, I'm not even going to buy one of these, because when these people get raided, I will get a nasty letter from the government, like I did last time. And so, but I'm a dirtbag script kiddie at heart, and I want to just drive around the neighborhood broadcasting garage door opening frequencies. And that's it. I don't know. That's my whole thing. But yeah, anyway, none of that stuff comes installed on here. That's all stuff, again, like people have put that together as like a nice little bonus thing of you go find it on GitHub, you go find it around the internet, you go find these repos and just copy all the files over to the SD card, and then suddenly you're loaded up and ready to go. I was going to buy a hack RF with a Portapack, which is sort of like this device but bigger and bulkier and crazier looking. And I still may get one of those someday, but yeah, I don't know. I got a Flipper Zero. I ordered it months ago on a whim. I was just like, I want to fuck around with this thing and see what it can do. And it's got GPIO pins, so people are like connecting Wi-Fi modules to it, and then conducting various Wi-Fi activities like deauth spoofing deauth attacks, all that other stuff. And it's a fun little thing. I can also use it. I have you can't quite see it, but I have a fan in the corner of this room that I put in here just to keep some air blowing around. It's not necessarily, it's, we're kind of past the heat wave, but this fan does have a remote control, but I lost that years ago. This has a built-in universal fan remote, and I can just hit it and let it sit there for a couple seconds, and eventually it'll turn it off or on. And so that's been fun. I don't know. I cloned my credit card. You can do that too with the tap to pay stuff. If you wanted to clone your own credit card that was definitely yours. I deleted that. I felt it was weird to maybe have a fucking copy of my credit card on an SD card. That seemed like, yeah, this thing's gonna get lost, and then suddenly someone's gonna find it and go, oh shit. So that's pretty neat. I don't know. Yeah, it's yes, exactly. If you were to go to a store with this thing and just be like, oh yeah, I'd like to pay, and then but odds are, like, who's gonna notice? No one's looking at that shit, and if they do, you just go like, oh yeah, it's mine, it's fine. No one, because they've done like the tap to pay credit card thing has led to people making like keychain versions of credit cards and all this other stuff. Ooh, okay. Atomic Fire on the Discord says that they have a Hack RF Portapack, so I maybe would want to talk to you later about what the right one, because this AliExpress is rotten with these things, and I'm never really sure which one to get or where to get it from, but I might I might move in that direction because I don't know why. I don't know. Like I went through and fucking I don't know. I opened my garage door with it this morning because I had to blow up the tires in a baby stroller, and I brought this out there to do it so that I could go through a menu to open the garage instead of just bringing the garage door remote or whatever. Anyway, super neat little device, just a cool little thing that is a super fun little, potentially you could get into trouble with it. You could certainly get into a lot of trouble with it. I saw if you go, again, like seeing people on TikTok talking about it, which I don't know if I just fell into the hole or if just talk on TikTok is heating up around it, or if someone just started posting. Anyway, someone started posting a bunch of videos of them doing a bunch of really generic shit with a flipper, and reading through the comments on that, you see stuff like, oh yeah, all the kids at my school have these, and it's a real pain in the ass because anytime a TV is involved, the TV just gets turned off and on over and over again because everyone's fucking pulling out their universal TV remote function and fucking fucking with TVs and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know. That's fun. It's fun to see this in like a friendly little package with a happy little dolphin on it and all that little stuff. It's a cool little device. I don't know what I'll get. I don't know what else I'll do with it. I feel like I'm kind of at the limit of like legal things to do with it. I do kind of want to copy that credit card to go try to use it and just see what happens. One of my credit cards would copy, one of them would not. But the other one is one that I have huge problems with using as a tap to pay thing. So I wonder if maybe just the tap to pay on that credit card is just dead or what. But yeah, I don't know. I do want to go try to use one at a gas station, go buy some energy drinks with a Flipper Zero or whatever. But like, you know, there's other videos going around. Like there was one going around that got some attention of someone using one at a Dave and Buster's and, you know, kind of walking up to a machine and holding the thing up to it and then the machine ringing up credits. And that's cool. But again, you have to clone an existing card with that. So if you took your own card and cloned it, it would still take money off that card because the server, you know, it's still doing the math in the background, not on the card itself. And so you know, you're not really, you know, you're not really stealing that way. You would have to go out of your way to clone someone else's card. Again, this still requires the tools of the trade, the social engineering, some kind of, you know, you need a pretty lady at one end of the bar that's winking at the guy. And then when he's looking over here like this, you're rifling through his bag to copy his security badge. And then you're going to Dave and Buster's and you're playing games for free and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, it's not, you need a crew like Sneakers. When we reboot Sneakers, there'll be someone will have a Flipper Zero in it and they will get clowned on, but it'll end up somehow saving them by the end of the movie or something like that. All right, I'm going to go write that screenplay. I'm going to go dump this garbage drink out and see if I have anything else that's cold. I hope I do. Oh, anyway, that drink's disgusting. We're going to take a quick ad break and be back after. Oh, I didn't set that up. I did not set that up very well. Okay, and we will be back right after this. It's all about the get back. You know, it's all about getting back up on your 2 feet and keeping it moving. But, you know, sometimes if you're out the night before, maybe hanging out and you have a few drinks, maybe that get back is a little bit slower than you'd like. A little more sluggish, a little more like, oh boy, I gotta. Well, listen, what you gotta do is look into Zbiotics. Because Zbiotics can help you with those rough mornings. That's right. Zbiotics pre-alcohol probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut called acetaldehyde. And it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Zbiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. and it's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut where you need it most. All you got to do is drink Zbiotics before having any alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. Now, this is how does this work? It's these little tiny bottles that you just chug back. It is a less than a shot. Is just a less than a one of those little energy. It's not even a 5 hour. It's way small. You throw that back, and you're good to go. You can get out there, have a few drinks, and then the next morning, bing bang boom, you should just be springing right out of bed, ready to rip. And do it all over again. No, whatever you're into at that point. You can kind of live your life the way you want to live your life instead of having those mornings. Not worth it. Not worth it. But Zbiotics can erase that. Get it off the slate. Get it out of your way so you can get up and do whatever you get. Well, you gotta go shopping before people get out there. You gotta go early to beat the crowds. Whatever it is, whatever your mornings are all about. Or, hey, late afternoons, however you're rolling. Zbiotics can make it a reality for you. Give Zbiotics a try for yourself. Go to zbiotics.com/Jeff to get 15% off your first order when you use the code Jeff at checkout. Zbiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. And hey, Halloween is right around the corner. You gonna have some drinks at Halloween? Yeah, you're gonna dress up. What are you gonna? You can dress up like a witch. You can dress up like a sexy little witch. You can dress up like a sexy little witch to have some drinks. Are you? Or like I don't know. I dressed up like a Ghostbuster when I was a kid. I would do that again. I would dress up like a Ghostbuster. Now, those jumpsuits might be a little too thick, might be a little too warm, depending on where you're at. But hey, order a bag of Zbiotics for you and your friends today to make sure you get it in time for Halloween. So when you're having your drinks, candy, cocktails, whatever you're into, you'll be ready to rip. Remember, head to zbiotics.com/Jeff and use the code Jeff at checkout for 15% off. And thanks to Zbiotics for sponsoring the episode. All right, we're back. And we're in luck. There's just a regular ass white can of Monster in the fridge, nice and cold, ready to go. So thankfully, the morning is saved from whatever the heck that coffee drink was. Yuck. So disgusting. Why don't we talk about some video games? Why don't we talk about some video games? Okay? Hyper Demon just came out, kind of came out of nowhere yesterday, the 19th. Hyper Demon is the new game from the creators of Devil Daggers. Remember Devil Daggers kind of had a PlayStation 1-esque look to it and was a real leaderboard game of you're a weird hand ready to do one of these, and you're shooting daggers out of your arm at devil skulls, and it looks kind of like a PlayStation 1 game, and it's super fucking cool and quite difficult, but also had this really great leaderboard functionality built in where you could watch anyone else's run. You could watch their full run, so you could watch people getting extremely better at the game than you are. Hyper Demon is the follow-up to that. And it's fucking crazy. I have not spent a ton of time with it. This game is mechanically it is more dense than Devil Daggers. It has jump canceling into slides and it has ground pounds and some other stuff like that, but generally the basics of it are still weird devil skulls are coming at you and you are shooting out of your hand at them, and also scoring is completely different in this game. Instead of it being like, hey, how long can you survive, now it is a constant countdown. So you start, I think, with 10 seconds on your clock, and it can go negative. And I think if you get below -30, the game will end. But every time you kill something, you get time added to that clock. And there are crystals that you collect that I believe will also add time. Again, there's a lot going on all at once in Hyperdemon, so it is visually sometimes a little difficult to parse. And so you are constantly having to aggressively get out there and get your score up. And whenever you die, whenever you get hit, that's the time that you end up filing, you know, and so I have like, I think my best time is 12 seconds or something like that, which is basically not lasting for very long, getting a few kills and then getting hit and dying. And so the early strategy is get a couple of kills and immediately die before the time can tick away, I guess. But it's from there, I'm not sure where it goes from here. They're also the Steam page. It's being billed as a game with full 360-degree field of view, because it does this weird bendy thing that usually will bend to 180 degrees, but sometimes you're seeing ghostly images that I think are meant to insinuate that something is behind you. It's just like visually, it's fucking bizarre. And figuring out what you're looking at any given time is difficult. But it also has a bunch of tutorials. So it's got, I want to say it's like 16 something like that, 16 different things that you can go through, and it'll show you like, here's how you do the ground pound, here's how you know, because it's a rocket jump type of thing. You rocket jump your way up and then hit the space bar to slam down, and here's how you slide, and here's how you jump out of a slide. If an enemy's eyes are flashing at you because it's very close, you can hit the space bar while moving sideways to dodge, and you'll get a little bit of a slow motion kind of dodge thing going on there. And I haven't finished all of those yet. So I feel like hopefully by the end of that, I will have wrapped my mind around what it is that I'm even looking at. Because like Devil Daggers is a cool visual style, but it's very straightforward. You know, you're kind of like, you're in a relatively smallish space, jumping around, bouncing around, shooting at enemies. Like there's mechanics, there's thoughts to like, okay, am I tapping the button to shoot a shotgun-like blast? Am I holding it down to shoot more of a steady stream? If I am shooting that steady stream, then the gems that I'm hoping to collect do not move towards me. If I let off the fire button, it will move off towards me. Then those gems will start moving in my direction. And I believe that's still the case here. You should go look at this game, I guess. Like I'm not going to spend too much more time talking about it because I haven't spent a ton of time with it yet. But you should go look at the Steam page for Hyperdemon. It's 2 words. It's $15. I don't know that I can recommend it wholeheartedly one way or the other, because it's really, I think it's really cool. I'm looking forward to spending more time with it and digging into it. At the same time, I can't say like, if you liked Devil Daggers, you'll love Hyperdemon, because there's so much going on that you might just look at it and go like, this is too much for me. I can't deal with it. I cannot deal with it. And so we'll see. I need to spend some more time with it. The way the field of view will occasionally bend in a direction. It's like, it is incredibly trippy. It is effed up. It also feels evil. Whereas, and I kind of alluded to this on Twitter yesterday. Whereas Jeff Minter makes games that have a trippy look, but are generally of a friendly vibe. When it gets hectic, you're still like, hey man, it's cool. You're trying to achieve some sort of happy, friendly zone as you shoot your way through all of these yaks and other beasts and all this other stuff. This is like that this is like if there was a knob. This is like that on like the fucking worst designer drugs that don't even have fucking names yet. Like you turned the dial all the way to bad times, and then this is that game. This isn't good time, fluffy, friendly. Hey, everybody, we're having a really chill time up here. Just everybody, we're keeping it plur. This is whatever the opposite of fucking plur is. This is you took some 2CT7 and have been on a meth bender for about a day and a half, and this is what you're seeing. You know, it's I don't know. I don't normally like describing games as drugs because I think that's an easy way out. But at the same time, as a point of comparison for what the Jeff Minter games, what the Llamasoft games traditionally have gone for, this one is like you have not slept in a month and a half, and yes, your skin is flaking off from all the crocodile, and this is how it's going. This is what you see as your life is leaving your body. It's mean. It has an evil vibe to it. Like Devil Daggers, obviously it's got devil right in the name and there's skulls and all that stuff, but it's not like, there's some unsettling visuals in Devil Daggers, but Hyper Demon feels aggressive. Hyper Demon feels aggressively evil. There's a look to it that is wrong. It's the way it bends, because as it starts to show a wider field of view and do all this stuff, like it's really unsettling. It's really unsettling. And I think that's cool as hell. I don't know. But again, I can't sit here and tell you that I like the video game or not yet, because I'm really having trouble figuring out what the hell I need to do, and I need to carve out some time to go through the tutorials once or twice or something like that. Go look at the Steam page for Hyper Demon. Go watch that trailer, but also if you scroll down, they've got some animated GIFs of the weird circular view that is like, that sometimes pops on, that seems to be the game trying to give you a wider and wider field of view. It's a mess. It's so crazy. But it has all that same stuff of like, oh, you can go back and watch other people's replays and do all this other stuff. So ostensibly, you should be able to play it and drag yourself through it and figure out ways to get better at it. But it is a lot. And you should check it out. Maybe you should check out the Steam page. Maybe it is for you. Maybe it is for you. It might be for me. I can't tell. But there's not a lot like it. Even though it is superficially similar to Devil Daggers, there's still not a lot like it. You know what? Let's get the other ad out of the way right now, and then that'll be the last break for the show here. Let's get this other ad going. You want ad-free show? Go to patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann, and we'll check out this ad, and then we will be right back with the rest of the program. When you see these Miracle brand sheets, you will be saying, it's a miracle, because of how well these sheets can keep you cool on a hot night. That's right. Keeping cool at night is one of those things that can really impact your sleep quality. You know, you wake up too hot, you wake up too cold, all that other stuff. Why don't you check out Miracle Brand's self-cooling bed sheets? How do they self-cool? Okay. They are inspired by the silver-infused fabrics made by NASA. The space people. Miracle Brand makes temperature-regulating bedding so that you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. That's right. They're using these silver-infused fabrics that were originally developed by NASA so that these sheets from Miracle Brand are thermoregulating, designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long so you get better sleep every night. And they're kind of self-cleaning. Hey, that's silver in there. That's silver-ass silver. Real silver. It's not some... So what does silver do? It's antibacterial. Yes. So they'll clean themselves up for you. 99.9% of bacterial growth eliminated by these silver-infused sheets, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than other sheets, and that'll keep the stink out of them, which is nice. And that can be better for your skin, you know? All that bacteria, clogging up your pores, all that other stuff. If the silver-infused sheets just wipes that away, then you're sleeping on cleaner sheets, keeping your face a little bit cleaner, keeping those pores unclogged, fewer breakouts and other skin problems. And these Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands. The sheets use a premium 500 thread count sateen weave that's made with USA grown cotton, one of the highest quality cottons in the world. Go to trymiracle.com/Jeff to try it today. And here's a special deal for you. Be sure to use the promo code Jeff at checkout, and you will save, strap yourselves in for this, 40% off. I know that's crazy. That's almost half. And that's not all. You will also get 3 free towels. That's 40% off plus 3 free towels. And Miracle is so confident in their product that it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you are not 100% satisfied, you will get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep today with Miracle Brand. Go to trymiracle.com/Jeff and use the code Jeff to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save 40% off. Crazy. Again, that's trymiracle.com/Jeff. And thanks to Miracle Brand for sponsoring this episode. Okay, let's talk about Modern Warfare 2. The third? No. Oh, whatever. This is the follow-up to Modern Warfare of 2019, the reboot, the reboot of the reboot of the remaster. And they ran their first beta weekend last weekend after Call of Duty Next happened, where they kind of rolled out a bunch of announcements around the game itself and gave some details and all this other stuff. And then this upcoming weekend, that beta will happen again, and it will be expanded to both Xbox and PC players. This weekend was PlayStation only because marketing dollars. I guess to start with, so they've done this type of reveal event for the last couple of years now, and it's really good at alienating. I feel very alienated when I watch the way that they do these reveal events, where they're like, they get out and they talk about the game, and you're like, okay, I'm going to glean some details from this. Most of this stuff is leaked already, so whatever. And they gave date, like Warzone is not going to launch alongside the game. It is hitting, I guess, on November 16th. So a little bit later. And it is, they do this thing where they spend a lot of time talking about changes to the game and all this other stuff. And then they're like, and we've got 200 of the best creators, the best Call of Duty creators here to play it. And it goes esports in a way that, like, okay, think about this. This Call of Duty is like one of, if not the best-selling third-party game on consoles year in, year out. And they focus this thing on esports and the kind of high-end competitive scene in a way that I feel doesn't really line up with the way most people play those games. And I feel like it does the game a disservice in some ways when you see it in this context, because you've got all this stuff, and they used it, like, I think even some of the preloaded loadouts and stuff like that maybe also allude to, like, I guess in professional Call of Duty, they now have like positions, like it was a real sport or something. And so they talk about rushers and campers and like the different styles of play. And I think they've codified that a little bit in game with some of the way the loadouts work. And it just feels, I don't know, like, to me, Call of Duty is laser tag. It's like you went to the pizza place with a laser tag arena and you fucking ran around and shot some people, and maybe you won and maybe you lost, but like, whatever, you're having a good time doing it. And then at the end, hopefully there's pizza. And so for me, it's just, it's not to say that I don't, like, occasionally take it seriously and how, like, I would like to win and do well and all of that sort of stuff. But, like, generally speaking, I'm just having fun doing the thing. And I think that they've honed that thing and they've made it pretty fun. Some years it is significantly less fun than others, depending on the trappings surrounding the core activities. But, like, I am not here to fucking, like, I want a general sense of balance. I want the game to feel balanced, but mostly I want the game to just be fun and have a lot of things for me to futz with. And so I was really skeptical almost coming out of their event, because again, they spend so much time on, like, look at these pro players doing pro player things. And it's like, okay, yeah, great. That guy's running around with a sniper rifle doing dumb shit. I'm like, okay, cool, fine. That's not engaging to me. That's not something I, really want to, it's not something that makes me excited one way or the other about the game. It's just like, okay, yeah, these guys are doing the same thing they do. Like, if anything, it's like, oh, all those skills translate over because you didn't change the game at all. And so it ends up just coming off as like, here's the same game again. I think they do their own game a disservice by showing it that way. But at the same time, that also led to, like, all those people do have audiences, right? It's not like they're streaming to fucking no one. So clearly there are people that like watching that style of fucking play. And all those people were streaming on top of being there at the event and stuff like that. So I'm sure, like, I'm sure Activision at the end of the day looked at like some numbers and were like, well, there were just 4 million people engaged with some form of this event or whatever by the end of the day or whatever it ended up being. Anyway, the thing in this beta that I'm really back and forth about, and I streamed the game on Friday morning, so maybe you saw a little bit of that. It was really messed up. I had to leave in the middle to my son's birthday. I had to leave in the middle to go deliver cupcakes somewhere and stuff like that. So it's a messy stream that I'm not going to archive until I finally I'm going to create a second YouTube channel that's probably just going to get raw archives that are just like, here's the unedited everything for people who want that, so that can live over there without, you know, looking weird amongst all the clips and all that other stuff. Anyway, to me, the biggest change in the game this time around is the way that perks work. Now, if you're not familiar with perks, when you go create a custom loadout, you're picking a gun and you're picking attachments that go on that gun. You're picking your secondary weapon. You're deciding if you want, like, do I want a grenade or do I want Molotov cocktails? You know, like those sorts of decisions. And then generally speaking, you are picking 3 perks. Year in, year out, that's usually about how it goes. And these usually are broken up into 3 different categories. And these are things that kind of just like change the way you exist. And some of them are very simple. Some of it is just like you move slightly faster, you know, or you move faster when crouched compared to someone who did not pick this perk. Or you have 2 grenades instead of 1. And your grenades will slowly respawn in your inventory if you live long enough to have that happen. Or like, hey, instead of a pistol, you can take 2 rifles if you want. If you want to burn a perk on that to have 2 fully featured guns instead of like a primary and a secondary, you can do that too. And that's generally how that stuff exists. And that's roughly how it still is. But it used to just be, you would pick your 3 perks, you would have them, and that's that. Now how they're working is you pick 4 perks, and these are called perk packages now. And by default, you can pick some pre-selected ones that are like, if you want to be a stealth guy, you could pick this one. If you want this, you could be this. And so they've got a few pre-made, but you can make your own. And so you pick 4 perks, and the first 2 come out of the same pool. And these are really basic things. That's like where you get, you're like, oh, do you want 2 primary weapons? Like a lot of the same concepts from previous Call of Duty games are still in here. But just some of the ways that you get them is maybe a little bit different. So the perks in those first 2 categories are very generic, or they're things that are like crucial to a loadout that you know wouldn't make sense to get later. Because the other 2 perks you get later. You start with the 2 perks, you pick your 3rd and your 4th, and those come out of separate pools. They're more powerful, they're more generally more powerful than the stuff in the first category. And so like after, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes in a match, depending on how you play, seemingly if you are playing well, you maybe will unlock them sooner. I haven't really gotten a good feel for that part of it yet. Your 3rd perk will pop. You pop your 3rd perk. And then, you know, whatever you picked activates. For me, that's cold-blooded, which keeps my little dot from showing up on other people's mini-maps in certain situations, keeps equipment from targeting me. Like, there's a handful of little, like, stealth-like benefits from that. And then later on in the match, your 4th perk will pop. And once you get that, then you're fully loaded with your perks for the rest of the match. And so it used to be that you would decide going in, I want to be the stealth guy that doesn't show up on any, the UAVs don't see me. I'm going to take a quiet weapon so that my dot doesn't show up. This doesn't show up. Like all the sorts of stuff that is going to prevent me from showing up on a mini map, showing up on the compass, all that sort of stuff. And you pick that at the start of the game and you have it through, you know, the duration of the match. Now you are gonna show up on UAVs and all that other stuff at the start of a match every single time, because there's no way to be invisible to them at the outset. That's something that you will earn over the course of the match if you have spec'd in that direction. You can obviously go through, and that's how I've spec'd. That's how I've always that's usually how I end up speccing out, is like, I want to not be on I want to not show up on the mini map. I want to not show up on other people's radars, all that other stuff. And generally speaking, that's how I play. If the beta was up right now, I would list off the other perks and stuff like that, but I don't have that information in front of me. But that is basically how I've built it out. And so it's weird, because at the start of a Call of Duty match, everyone is basically the same. You know, the things that are really going to change, you know, there's stuff like, oh, I want to be, I think, oh, geez, I'm trying to, I think if it was an earnable perk or one of the base perks, but there's stuff like, you know, I want to be I want to be more resilient to explosives. I think that's something you can choose as part of a base perk. And so there's little bits and pieces that'll be different at the start of a game, but generally speaking, everyone's on a relatively even playing field. And then as a match progresses, players will start to earn their third perk and fourth perk, and you won't necessarily know that, but by the end of a match, when you pop a UAV, you may see way fewer players show up than you did at the beginning of a match. And at first I was like, this is awful. I am really like shook about this. I think this is going to break the game. This is something that, like, it felt like something that was taking agency away from me when it came to customizing my character. And just it made it a little one-dimensional. And I think that at the start of a match, that's sort of still the case, because at the start of a match, everyone is on this relatively, you know, no one has the fancy shit, right? And leveling up, or, you know, kind of moving through this progression in match ends up being actually kind of interesting. I hated it on Friday, and then I played a bunch more Saturday night, and I had a couple of moments where, you know, but there was more stuff out there. There's some UAVs up, all this other stuff. I died, respawned, and that happened to be the moment when my ghost perk popped. And so then it was suddenly like, oh, I'm not going to show up on that shit anymore. But also, the other players are now like 12 minutes in, and they're used to knowing that everyone is showing up. And so players start disappearing. And so it's this weird thing of like, it happened to pop at the exact right moment, and I was able to take advantage of it. And that felt really interesting and relatively powerful, because you don't know. I should check the kill cams and see if you, because kill cams would often show your full loadout. And so maybe you do see someone's full loadout when they kill you. But there's that aspect of just like, okay, as the match goes on, these players are going to start to differentiate themselves because these perks. But I guess the problem with that, though, is that the perks are still roughly the same perks that they've always been. They're just chopping them up in slightly different ways. So with that in mind, it almost seems like that the ultimate perks, that fourth perk, there should almost be like shit in there that's way crazier, you know? Like, you almost want something that's like way more powerful for the late game, because sometimes those things pop and you've got like, you know, 4 minutes left in the match, and it's so you don't have a lot of time to go use that stuff. And, you know, there's some stuff around the edges that they probably still need to figure out, because like if you join a match late, you're at the, you know, which sometimes happens, you just hit go, and usually it throws you in at the start of a match, but occasionally it throws you in mid-match, and I don't think it compensates you for lost time or whatever. It should almost be like, oh, if the average player has unlocked their fourth perk by now, then we're just going to give it to you right now, or whatever. And yeah, I don't know. I had some moments with it where that whole system clicked and really made a ton of sense. And I was like, you know what? Actually, the idea that like over the course of a match that you're going to start to see players either disappearing off radar, or, you know, getting access to like things that are going to make it a little bit different and make the game feel a little bit different. I think that's actually kind of interesting. And so I'm kind of coming around on it, but I'm still not. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird, and we'll see. I assume that the beta has all of the perks in the game. That they're not like, oh, there's 4 more that we didn't put in the beta or whatever. But yeah, it inspires you to want to play better, because as you score more points, you are getting closer to unlocking your perks. And so having that, it's not purely just a time thing. But I'm still kind of back and forth on it. But I guess the thing is playing it on Saturday, I had some really cool moments that felt like they were a direct result of the changes made to that perk system. And so they're onto something, but I'm just not sure if it's worth the kind of vanilla early game to get to that point. We'll see. It'll be active again this weekend. I'll probably play a bunch on PC and see how that works out. The rest of the game, it's another Call of Duty game. They've changed up, they're calling it's like the part where you go to customize the guns and stuff is Gunsmith 2.0. And it's like, it just feels like a slightly different way to equip attachments, but not even all that different. It seems like the big change is you can, change the receiver on a gun in that screen, which then kind of changes it to a different gun entirely without having to back all the way out and pick a different gun and go all the way back in and stuff like that. So there's something convenient about that, but generally speaking, it's still like a lot of like pros and cons for each attachment. Like, oh, hey, you can put this big scope on the gun and it'll improve your accuracy, it'll improve your range, like all this other stuff, but also you'll aim down sights slightly slower and all this other stuff. So like all those attachments just come with so many pros and cons that I find myself, and this is how I played the last couple that did this, or certainly Modern Warfare 1, is the low level gun attachments are just positives. They're just like, they don't do as many positive things as the later ones do, but they also have no negatives to them. And so I would just go like, yeah, I'm just going to take this one. It's fine. So yeah, I don't know. Like the gun builds can get pretty complicated, but that I would say that about the previous Modern Warfare as well. There's some decent maps in here. I think there's a hotel map that's really good. There's a map, I believe it's called Farm 19, that I was not a huge fan of. And actually, no, that one's okay. There's a market map that I'm really not sold on. And they had slightly different stuff active every day, or the playlists kind of rotated. So when I logged on Saturday night, they did have a third person mode in there. That's something that they're bringing back to the franchise technically. But it has, there's a third person mode. And when you aim down sights, it pulls all the way into first person. So that aspect of the game still works the same, but when you're running around, and it's you get kind of some additional situational awareness around corners because of the way a third-person camera works, and your view of the world is ever so slightly different, and it seems really needless to me. It doesn't seem like a big. Yeah, it feels like a step down to me in terms of just like control and where you're at and where you're going and stuff. But it's also pretty different. So maybe it's just a situation of just like, because it feels different, it's that's why I'm way worse at it. But also like, yeah, I just kind of played it with like, yeah, this does not seem like something I will spend more time with. I guess maybe that'll be something, there are a lot of people playing Fortnite. PUBG started third person, and to me, PUBG is still a third person game, even though I know they've had a first person mode for forever as well. But that game to me is a third person game. Call of Duty is a first person game. Then never the twain shall meet, I guess. Yeah, it's the beta has left me hopeful about the final product in a way that I by the end of Saturday, by the end of Saturday, I was like, oh, you know what? Actually, there's some actually cool shit in here, and I am having a good time. Because playing it Friday morning, I was like, man, this is a bummer. This is better than Black Ops Cold War and Vanguard, but that's a low fucking bar. This doesn't feel like a proper successor to the previous Modern Warfare, and I'm still not sure if I don't know that I think it would be better than Modern Warfare 1 was when that came out a few years ago, but we'll see, I guess. I think one of the things they're doing that I actually think is super smart is they are letting people who pre-order it, I guess if you pre-order the expensive version, maybe it's just the expensive version, I'm not sure, you will get access to the campaign like a week early. And I think that's a genius way to trick people into playing the campaign for a franchise where people never like classically never touch and never finish the campaign. Having access to the game but only the campaign for a week, I think is actually really smart. And funny in a weird way as well. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see how that campaign ends up coming out. Who knows? But yeah, I don't know. I ended up on Modern Warfare 2 really wanting to play more of it. So, and I did not expect that based on when I played it Friday. I was like, man, this is, I was bummed out. I was bummed out on Friday playing it, but when they didn't have that hotel map in Friday morning, I think they threw it up on later on Saturday or later on Friday or something. So when I came back to it, I was getting nonstop matches on that hotel map. And I was like, this is actually cool. This is a good map. This is a fun map. I'm having a really good time. I'm using the radar gadgets and all the different stuff. And yeah, the game really clicked for me there. Okay. That's it for video games. They're over. They're done. Let's talk about some news about video games. Totally different. Grand Theft Auto is on these streets. It's everywhere. Last week, so I don't know if you know, I've said this before. I don't know if you know, I usually wake up somewhere around 4:20 a.m. Because that is when my son wakes up for his 4:20 a.m. feeding. So I get him up out of this bassinet back here. I change his diaper. My wife comes down, hooks him up with some boob action. And then lately he does not go back to sleep. No, he usually would go back to sleep after that and everything would be late. Lately he's just like, fuck it, I'm up. And so are you. And I'm like, great. This is great. We're having fun. But the fun thing about waking up at 4 a.m. is that sometimes you just open up Twitter and some wild shit has happened. You know, weird rumor going, like the EA Amazon rumor was one of those where I just like bleary eyed looked at my phone and went, oh fuck. That's not good. Ugh. And then that ended up being not true. But then I opened my eyes the other morning and was like, oh shit, a bunch of GTA stuff. Yeah, that'll happen, I guess. And then I was like, I should probably look at some of this before it all gets taken down. And so I'm sitting there at 4 a.m, looking at videos of, you know, characters walking up to soft cover points and seeing them get into cover animations and all this other stuff. Someone hacked Rockstar. Someone got into, whether it was the Rockstar employee Slack or whatever, certain systems, certain private places where Rockstar developers develop was compromised, and a lot of footage got out, something like 90 different videos and apparently some source code and different stuff like that. And some guy just posted it all to a GTA forum. And yeah, I don't know. People think that the kid is maybe 16 that did this. And so there's a lot of like, oh, this is also the same person that just hacked Uber, which maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. I don't know. There was screenshots of claiming to be legit of like the hackers saying like, I want to make a deal with Rockstar, which is like a great way to go to jail. yeah, we'll see what ends up happening here. So there's just a lot of stuff. Obviously, like the assets came out, and then Rockstar posted something acknowledging, hey, yeah, like after they issued a bunch of takedowns, which came from Take-Two. So you're like, well, clearly this is a very legit. And also everything shown lined up with a lot of the storyline and setting leaks from a couple of months ago now. Rockstar posted this message. We recently suffered a network intrusion in which an unauthorized third party illegally accessed and downloaded confidential information from our systems, including early development footage for the next Grand Theft Auto. At this time, we do not anticipate any disruption to our live game services, nor any long-term effect on the development of our ongoing projects. We are extremely disappointed to have any details of our next game shared with you all in this way. Our work on the next Grand Theft Auto game will continue as planned, and we remain as committed as ever to delivering an experience to you, our players, that truly exceeds your expectations. We will update everyone again soon, and of course, we'll properly introduce you to this next game when it is ready. We want to thank everyone for their ongoing support through this situation. And yeah, so they kind of had to comment on this by Monday morning because the stock price was taking a hit. That's the working theory is that they had, because there was an SEC filing around this saying like, we don't anticipate any problems, because they needed to get out there and because people are like, oh my god, what is this going to do to the development of the game? Which, like, nothing, unless wide swaths of source code that could be used to create cheats and stuff like that. And one of the other weird things going around in the wake of this that I saw was that the person who did this hack was apparently, and again, this is all secondhand. I can't necessarily verify this is fully legit, but that there was an author of GTA 5 cheats that asked this hacker for some source code because they're currently in the middle of a lawsuit with Rockstar, with Take-Two, and that they thought that maybe this getting access to these details would help them in their lawsuit. So that could be some potential fallout there or something. But so there's a lot of weird ins and outs around this stuff, a lot of weird angles. But, obviously Rockstar coming out and saying it's legit is the part where it says it's legit. But does this impact development? No. The only time that this would impact development is if, again, source code that needed to be changed or anti-cheat stuff that needed to be changed in order to secure the game. If all of their anti-cheat stuff leaked out, maybe they would have to respond to that because people would know how to get around it. Or if a bunch of things related to currently live games like Grand Theft Auto Online, if you had a bunch of GTA 5 stuff there happen that required a bunch of work, maybe you have to pull some people off of GTA 6 back onto 5 to fix the anti-cheat situation there. But the idea that this would impact development at all, and apparently some, if not all, of the footage that got out was actually quite old, from the looks of things. And so this just seems like something that has zero impact on the game in terms of development. Obviously, I'm sure that there is a blow to the company morale, because suddenly they've got players out there that are not well versed in what unreleased games look like, suddenly judging every single aspect of it, and just like people just being so sure of themselves that like, no, that part's final. Like, no, this game is almost certainly multiple art passes away from being done. I would not think that any of that stuff is necessarily locked at this point. This game's not coming out anytime soon. They've still got time to change a whole lot of shit about it, and they've still got a lot of time left to work on it. And so the very idea that people are judging this stuff and going like, oh my god, this game looks like shit. I'm like, what the fuck are you even looking at? You're looking at like characters, you're looking at model tests in an editor. You're not even looking at anything that is meant to look like the final game. It's just like really bizarre takes on this from people who fucking have no idea about how, I barely have any idea about how game development works, but I'll tell you this. A lot of games look like absolute shit until they're just about ready to fucking go. And so when you see trailers, when you see gameplay demos at trade shows, it may very well be the case that that's the only part of that game that looks that good, because the rest of it's a fucking mess. And even the stuff that they made for their vertical slice, they hacked together and cheated on in all these weird ways just to get that thing out the door so they could say, this is what we think the final product will look like. But the final product, but the product in motion doesn't look anything like that yet. So even stuff like, oh, I don't think this character looks good. I think her hair should be different. I think this should be that. Like, yeah, sure, maybe. All that stuff's subject to change. They're very much in the middle of developing a very, very large, very, very expensive game. And so seeing footage that is old, so that's why it's a morale hit, because if this footage is like reportedly a year or two old or something, the builds they're working on today probably look vastly different on top of that, like dramatically different from what that stuff looked like. But even the stuff they've got right now is probably still subject to change. How much of that game is truly, truly locked? If it's not coming out anytime soon. And it's like 2024 or something probably, right? So yeah, getting worked up about this one way or the other seems very silly to me. And we'll see how it goes. If this hacker does truly want to try to make a deal with Rockstar. There was another thing, and again, it's just this could just be easily people faking screenshots and stuff like that. It's hard to know which of these communications are actually coming from the hacker and which of this is just people just making fake shit. I saw something with a guy saying like, hey, was there any Bully 2 stuff in there? And the response being like, oh yeah, I've got some Bully 2 stuff. I'll put it together. So who knows if there's other little bits and pieces in there, but it seems that Rockstar has a handle on what this person had access to, and they're confident enough to come out and say publicly, hey, this isn't not going to impact the timeline of our game. So presumably that means that, no user data, no weird leak that's going to make people change their passwords. No, none of that stuff. So, good luck to the developers at Rockstar to continue making that game. It looks like it'll probably be a fucking very long time and all of that sort of stuff. But like, I don't know, this stuff happened and I looked at the stuff and went like, yep, looks like what you would be doing to make an open world game. You're working on cover, you're working on animations related to getting in and out of cover, you're working on this and that. Some people have tried to pick apart every piece of footage and be like, I saw an article this morning that was like, here's every weapon we saw in the leaked footage. And it was like a Slim Jim. Probably the car break-in tool, not the beef stick, but wouldn't it be cool if you could wield a gigantic beef stick? Maybe if Saints Row had a big giant fucking Slim Jim in it, you could snap into and beat people with. Maybe we would have a different conversation about that game. But it was like, here's a assault rifle, here's that, or here's the different types of ammo that we saw that you could pick up and all that sort of stuff. And so I don't know. Again, none of that, dissecting all that footage to put together all of these articles that just read like the same preview articles that companies used to write when Rockstar would give them a tiny slice. Like when I'm pretty sure we did the trees of San Andreas. We didn't do the trees of San Andreas. Like we did like, here are the cars, the wire, the different rims of San Andreas. Here's all the different car wheels you can put on, like all that sort of stuff. So the idea that like people are out there just writing that type of article anyway off of leaked footage is really funny to me. Uber was also hacked, and they claim to be working with the FBI about their own hack. Some people have tried to say that this is the same person that did both hacks, and we will see how that all comes together. I think if the bit about that hacker claiming to want to make a deal with Rockstar, like whether that's some kind of blackmail situation or whatever, yeah, I don't know. That seems like a real good way to fuck up and end up in jail. Once you start trying to make it about money, like it's already a weird, already the ethics of it are super fucking shitty to begin with. But to then try to extort money from a company to not leak details about their upcoming video game, like at some point just go like, yeah, generally I think people doing hacking and stuff like that. Like sometimes I am like, yeah, man, hack the planet. But let's get I get my Flipper Zero out here. We'll get the rest of the source code out of there too. Sweet. The minute they start trying to fucking extort money, it's like, nah. I don't know. Maybe nail this guy to the wall. I don't know. Maybe track him down. I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, that stuff's out there. We'll see if anything more comes of this. If that person is sitting on anything else that they're going to leak or try to sell, or where the story goes, or if this ends up like the Valve situation where they're like, you seem like a sharp guy. We would love to have you come out and meet with us to talk about security. Maybe you could work here. You seem pretty smart. And then dumbass. Some PlayStation news in the news. Some folks got their hands on, their eyes on, their face on the PlayStation VR 2. And it sounds like the impressions are generally pretty positive. I thought one of the things that I picked out from the few that I read is people highlighting the comfort of PSVR 2, which to me, that was one of the biggest differentiators of the original PlayStation VR, is that it felt very light and nice on the face. And it sounds like they have not given up on that. It sounds like their single cable solution is convenient. I mean, it's not wireless, but, is at least a longer cable that is easy to step over and not trip over while you're spinning around and doing all that sort of stuff, which sounds nice. Sounds like the tracking is good. Sounds like the screens, the look great. It sounds awesome. It sounds like a great VR headset. It sounds like people were at least lightly impressed with the software, but also the firmware end of things in terms of mapping your space out and doing all that stuff. Sounds like it's very cool at a system level and very easy to use, which is great. It sounds like the controllers are good. And yeah, I guess I wouldn't expect anything less at this point, because I think when they move to inside-out tracking, that solves my biggest problem with PSVR 1, was that it had to use that camera. And for me, that camera never worked well. And so the tracking on PSVR 1 fucking sucked. The downside is that the PlayStation VR 2 will not be backwards compatible with games for PlayStation VR 1. This is something that came out on the official PlayStation podcast, courtesy of Hideaki Nishino, the Senior Vice President of Platform Experience at PlayStation. Asked directly, this is comes from Kotaku's article on the subject. Asked directly about whether last-gen VR titles would be playable on the new headset, Nishino stated that PSVR games are not compatible with PSVR 2 because PSVR 2 is designed to deliver a truly next-generation VR experience. I don't... That's... a lot of... it seems like that there should be a way for them to develop some kind of shim that sits in the PlayStation 5 firmware at the system level that properly emulates what an original PlayStation VR expects. And I think, yes, when you start saying we're not backwards compatible because we want to deliver a truly next-gen experience, you start to create a lot of questions about, like, well, your console is very backwards compatible. What is that? Is the PlayStation 5 not a truly next-gen experience? Because it plays old games. This also reminds me of the Rumble and controllers. That's so last gen. Like, it's just one of those weird, like, hand wavy answers that does not sit well with me. Especially when you think about Steam VR and you think about the number of different headsets with number of different tracking solutions that are all able to just plug right in and go. I can't sit here and tell you that I know how much work goes into doing that. I do know that, inside out tracking is very different from a camera tracking unit, of course. But this does seem like something that there should be a pathway, even if developers have to, and maybe this is how it'll go. maybe this will allow for developers to go and say like, oh, we're going to take our PSVR game, Dreams, whatever, Hitman. We're going to do this update that now allows it to work with the PlayStation VR 2. But when I think about the ways that the upgrades and cross-gen and like the exact opposite of smart delivery, which is the way that Sony has decided to handle the differences between PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 games, could you code in support for a PlayStation 5 headset into a PlayStation 4 game, or do you also have to totally rebuild it as a PlayStation 5 version of the app? Do people then decide they want to sell $10 upgrades to the PS5 version or some other shit? Like, I don't know. We'll see if any PSVR 1 games are beloved enough and still being played enough to warrant getting that upgrade. And we'll see. I will say on the consumer side, I think this sucks. I think that this is something that they should take care of across the board, because it's not like there were maybe across the board is probably actually is probably a bit much with some of the, because there are plenty of VR games that came out that no one is ever going to think about ever again on the PlayStation VR 1. But of course, like the big games will get native versions. The big games will make their way to PlayStation 5. Your Beat Sabers, whatever, the standard games that have to go will go one way or the other. So hopefully they go for free for existing owners, and they're not something that's going to require people to buy upgrades and all that other crap. But we'll see. So that was a little bit of a bummer to read that they're not, but also unsurprising that it ended up going that way. Okay. Also, PlayStation 5 news. Tom Henderson of Insider Gaming. Not that insider that got blown the fuck out. This is a different insider. Apparently, according to Tom Henderson, there is an add-on. Okay, there's a new version of the PlayStation 5 in the works, because of course there's always a new version of the PlayStation 5 in the works. But this one specifically, it sounds like one of the things they are doing is moving towards an external disk drive. So right now, of course, the PlayStation 5 is something that they sell in two variants, where you've got the version that has the drive built in, and you've got the version that has no drive at all, and it's slightly cheaper. The idea here is that you would have an external drive that would connect via USB-C. So if you wanted to run disc games, you would put them in this external drive. And Tom Henderson, who is something of a track record for, this type of leak type information, has had sources indicate to him that the drive will attach to the console itself without looking like it's a totally separate piece, so that maybe it's something that bolts to the underside and ends up looking, maybe this ends up being a full visual redesign, so who knows. But the idea basically being that this is something that attaches in a way that will look natural. Maybe that's the same way, a Sega CD would sit on top of a Genesis. Like Game Boys to Men coming soon. And that's interesting. This also simplifies what they sell, because it means that they're out there just making a single type of PlayStation 5, and then they decide if they want to bundle that drive in or not. If you want to spend the extra money and get the drive, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. And then potentially you could buy one version and then add the drive later if you decide that you need a drive. I would be curious to know if this drive would work with existing PlayStation 5 digital versions. If they would sell this drive separately in a way that you go like, oh, well, I bought a launch PS5, but I bought the one without the drive, and now I want a disc. I want one with a disc, so I can go buy this external drive and plug it in and all this other stuff. And so potentially it works there. Or maybe they just decide, hey, if you bought the digital only one, you're fucking assed out, which would be super fucking crazy. But who knows how they're going to architect this thing. We'll see. I would have said that the PlayStation VR games would have been backwards compatible too. So, this is an interesting development. It calls to mind the HD DVD drive for the Xbox 360, which of course was not necessarily for, it was not for running games. That was for running King Kong, the movie. And it's, I bought the PlayStation 5 that has the disc drive in it because, of course, I was like, well, of course I have all these discs. I have not put a disc in that thing since I got it. So, did I need the drive? No. Is it nice to have it? Yes. Is it nice to know it's there in case I do need it? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But I have not used it a single time. Because I've been, primarily buying digital games for over a generation now. And so, it's, even my PS4 games are things I can just download. Generally speaking, I do have quite a lot of PS4 discs around here, to be honest, but they're, generally speaking, not games I'm going back to on a regular basis. But it's nice to know that I can, is the thing. I would be curious. The thing that I would look at when it comes to this in terms of the things that Sony is going to have to think about and solve before they put this out, and maybe they already have I'm sure they already have a solution to this, right? That you wouldn't even, is piracy. Once you've got an external drive, you're moving all of your security and checks about what if a game is real or not to a USB device. And so could someone then say, oh, we're going to hook up we're going to just plug this USB cable into this Arduino, this FPGA, this, whatever, a drive with a real drive with hacked firmware on it, whatever sort of things that you could then use to pass it either a fake disk or just a fake key for just like, hey, oh yeah, no, this is definitely, yes, there's a copy of this PlayStation 4 disc in this drive for real. It is extremely real. Yes, no, PS5 Godfall is definitely inserted in this drive, and you should download all the patches for it right now and get it running and blah, blah, blah. Is that something that is going to, it seems like that would be an attack surface, I guess, to me. So that's something that they would have to consider, of course, along the way. But we'll see. I don't know. That sounds like like a good solution to the like, how do you find ways to make more PlayStation 5s? How do you find ways to, continue to improve the cost on them and all that other stuff? Of course, does this mean the price is going to get lower? Maybe they'll raise it again. Who knows? Phil Spencer was out there at TGS being asked all those questions all over again about console pricing and all this other stuff. And he always leaves some wiggle room in questions like that. But for the most part, he pretty much shut down the idea of raising prices on Xboxes in selected territories, as Sony has, and as Meta has on the Oculus Quest 2, or as Facebook has on the Meta Quest 2. Branding. Seems like we got a little bit of branding going on over at Nvidia this morning. I did not know this was happening this morning. I thought this was happening tomorrow. I was wrong. Nvidia announced new cards, new graphics cards. This is the 40 series cards. So a 4090 will be hitting shelves on October 12th at a price of, wait for it, $1,600. Things have been so broken in pricing and graphics card pricing for so long. I know that they have generally returned to normal, but when someone said, when I first saw, hey, the new cards got announced and the 4090 is $1,600, my first reaction was, oh, okay. Because I figured they would be $2,000. And so like, that's how broken this shit has been for a while. So first in context, I had to buy a new computer last summer because I needed to do some upgrades. Parts were hard to come by already, so I had to buy a pre-built, and even that took months for me to get it. And when I first got it, the graphics card was DOA. and I had to like send that back to them and get another one, or rather get them to send me one and then send the broken one back, I guess is how it went. And so I bought a 3090 at like in the bad times, because I was in the middle of upgrading anyway. And I was like, well, if I'm going to upgrade, I'm going to spend all this money all at once. I'm just going to spend all this money all at once and do it. And so I spent way too much money on a computer because I had to have one at that point. My old one was in the process of falling the hell apart. When the pandemic started, I had to replace my CPU cooler, which is whatever, that's a minor fix. But like, it was just kind of all downhill from there. And it was like, okay, this CPU is fucking reached its, like, it's not quite its end of life, but like, I need to upgrade because I'm going to be working from home for a good long time. It turns out, working from home for a very long time. And all this other stuff, I need to get a computer. And so I ended up buying a pre-built, and I ended up buying a 3090 at the time when those were fucking way too expensive, and all this other stuff. So when this price of $1,600 got announced, like, that shit is still pretty fresh in my mind. So from that perspective, I was like, well, yeah, 1,600. That seems in line with what the 3090 was, which is not fucking true. It's just that the price went fucking bananas on those for scarcity reasons, for crypto reasons, all this other stuff. It sounds like that now that those Ethereum fucks have gotten off the fucking mining tip, that graphics cards will maybe not be as in demand for that shit as it used to be, which of course is actually going to have a much longer, cast a much longer shadow onto the graphics card market, as we will get into. It's not just the 4090. They're also going to do two versions of a card. There are two cards that they are both calling 4080. One is a 12 gig configuration. One is a 16 gig configuration. That will be out in November. The 12 gig will be $900. The 16 gig will be $1,200. Now, prior to this stuff getting announced formally, there had been a card that people were calling a 4070. And it maybe seems that this low-end 4080 was at one point something they were talking about as a 4070, because it's not just a RAM difference. It is a little bit more stripped down than that. So it's kind of weird that they're calling both of them 4080s. And what do they do? What do these cards do? They're fast. They're better. Sometimes they're twice as good. Sometimes they're 4 times as good, depending on which chart you're looking at. Faster video rendering, DLSS 3, which is an upgrade from DLSS 2. It sounds like one of the things there is that they're doing frame rate work there. DLSS is typically something that is used as, okay, we're going to take this game, render it at a lower resolution, and then through the power of artificial intelligence and CUDA cores, we are going to go up to make it look like, full resolution. And so you can run a game and up-res it weirdly in ways that you won't notice and all this other stuff. It's a really cool technology. If you haven't seen it, the DLSS stuff is really, it's fancy shit. This new version sounds like it will also work on frame rates to lead to higher frame rates, which to me just sounds like motion smoothing, which everyone loves on TVs. So why not bring it to games? A game is still going to like pull. This is Arthur Geese was talking about this on Twitter as I was watching it and going like, wait a minute, this seems weird to me. He kind of pointed it out, that like a game is only going to pull input so many times, and artificially smoothing out the frame rate is not going to be the same as running at that regular frame rate. And yeah, so that'll be a weird thing. DLSS 3 will be exclusive to these new cards, I guess. And so they were showing off a demo of Microsoft Flight Sim running at very high frame rates with the ray tracing turned on. Then, it would off running natively on an older card and all this other stuff. Maybe one of the other reasons they didn't go with a lower end card, a true 4070 or whatever, is that now there's kind of a glut of 30 series cards still on the market. Those have become, I think Nvidia has said as much, that like, hey, we maybe made too many of these because we were struggling to meet demand for so long, and now we've got a fuck ton of these things laying around. And so Yeah, maybe they didn't make a lower end card out there because then they would have to drop prices of the 30 series cards even more. Maybe this is probably a way for them to try to keep those prices at least a little bit up, but you have to hope, you have to imagine deals for those cards will be coming. But also, you know, okay, well, anyway, okay, so we'll finish the news part of this. AMD will follow up with their announcements of RDNA 3 on November 3rd. We'll see what they have to offer. Traditionally, well, lately anyway, it doesn't seem like AMD is playing for the high-end market. Though the rumors sound like that they have a fucking super fast clocked card out there doing weird shit. So we'll see what they have to say in November. And then just before this announcement, EVGA, a company long known for making some, you know, well-regarded Nvidia cards, said that they're getting the fuck out the game. That they're like, hey, you know what? Nvidia sucks. Those guys are dicks. And we're done. And so this is Kotaku has a story here on this. This story went around. Basically, the implication here is that EVGA met with some, you know, the kind of the met with graphics card YouTube, and basically said that they're very frustrated with their partnership with Nvidia. The Kotaku story, kind of recapping this stuff, says that Nvidia has a reluctance to share essential information about its products with partners until that same information is made available to the public, often on stage at a press conference. And that it believes that Nvidia is undercutting partners like EVGA by selling their own Founders Edition cards at a lower price, and a sense among partners that Nvidia just doesn't value their patronage. And so EVGA sounds like that they're not going to have 40 series cards. They're going to sell through their 30 series cards and keep some around to help fix things. You know, if they have warranty repairs or replacements and all that other stuff, they will keep some cards around for that. But that they are generally going to be getting out the graphics card game. They also they do make motherboard. I think they make motherboards and a bunch of other stuff like that. But geez, you know, they were really known for the GPU market. I've had multiple EVGA cards over the years. And they say that they will attempt to keep all their employees, even though they're probably getting out of their biggest business. But I guess one of the things here is the margins on these cards, if they want to stay competitive, can be great. So at some point, yeah, like you have to just look at it and go like, well, fuck, man, like, you know, we're not making that much money per card. It's a gigantic hassle. Nvidia is continually making more and more of their own cards, and people are tending to move in the direction of maybe buying the Founders Edition, the kind of the reference card, if you will. And so people are gravitating more towards the Nvidia brand over time, which would make sense. This 3090 I have is an Nvidia card. I think my 2080 was an EVGA. And I think my 1080 was, maybe my 1080 was like a Zotac or something weird. Zotac. Anyway. You kind of can't blame them if it's that bad, if the relationship with Nvidia is that bad and the margin, the per card profits are really like that, and they are been left holding the bag on a ton of additional 30 series cards that they still need to sell through, while these 40 series cards are hitting the market, and Nvidia is maybe not being that friendly to them when it comes to getting 40 series cards off the ground. Yeah, I could see just being like, hey, we're done. This business is over. And we'll see what happens to EVGA. They are, like I said, relatively well regarded in the game, and I don't know what they're going to end up doing. Hey, you know, maybe they'll suddenly make AMD cards. I don't know. I don't know how that end of the business works. I have not. AMD's cards have not looked appealing to me just from a numbers perspective for some time now, so I haven't really kept too close of a tabs on that sort of stuff. My big question coming out of this, though, you know, with the year we've had in games, the last couple of years, you know, because think about it this way, they're going to put these 40 series cards out and the numbers look great. Honestly, like there is a part of me that is always looking to disgustingly justify a purchase of new gear. And, you know, there's a certain amount of me that's just like, you want a certain amount of tax write-offs at the end of the year because that's, you know, good for your overall tax burden and all this other stuff. And so I've got ways to justify buying one of these cards, and I may very well just like knee jerk take the plunge on a 4090 out of fucking some weird, I don't know why. But like that's, you know, but it's nice for, you know, to be able to speak to the quality of that stuff when people ask. Being in my position of doing this podcast, of doing these shows, all this other stuff, like there is some value in me being able to say, like, yes, I have seen it, even if it's not that impressive, being able to say, like, yeah, it runs better, but you don't want one. Like all that sort of stuff. Like there's value in being able to do that sort of stuff, you know, in this line of work. So like that's not me saying you should buy one. Like fucking, I'm actually saying don't. I think because I went to Twitter because, okay, what the fuck are you going to do with these cards? What are you actually going to do with a 4090? What games are coming out that are truly pushing the envelope visually, graphically, that you need that type of power? Big budget games have never been more fraught than they are right now, right? I mean, all we talk about is how all these games get pushed back. All anyone can talk about, and this is something that I wrote on Twitter, are there any games coming out now or coming soon that make you think you absolutely must get a 4090 at launch? The one use case I saw come up multiple times was VR. Because if you have really high-res VR headsets, then you are rendering 2 4K images at the same time. That additional power can come in handy. And of course, I get it. But what games coming up are you like, this is going to really take advantage of this? The ray tracing, DLSS 3 is going to be huge here. This is going to be awesome here. Like all that sort of stuff. Like, again, the big, expensive, flashy, graphical games just aren't coming at the rate that they used to. All those games get delayed. They come out and they're fucked up. You know, we're still talking about how busted Halo is. You know, Elden Ring already came out. Yeah, Elden Ring. So if you're upgrading, if you're 2 generations back, like I think it becomes a different conversation, right? If you're like, or even further, if you're like, well, I've got a 1080. You're like, yeah, okay. You might as well get something. You might as well go all the way. If you're going to go, I say, if you can afford it. But you know, again, as someone who has a 3090, it's foolish. That would be a foolish recommendation because it doesn't feel like these cards are necessarily always being maxed out. Unless you're trying to go full res. If you're trying to do, okay, I want a 4K, I want 120 hertz, I want 160, whatever. You know, I love this monitor I have here. This Asus, when I joined the Republic of Gamers, I have been very happy with this monitor that runs at 1440p and 165 hertz. And has G-Sync. So for games that cannot reach 165 hertz, still looks fucking nice and smooth. No tearing, none of that bullshit. All that variable refresh rate stuff is nice when you have it. It's a nice feature. And being able to run above 60 frames a second, it's nice. It looks great. It feels responsive. It's why I started playing Call of Duty on PC instead of console. Though I guess you can do 4K 120, or you can do 120 hertz on the PS5 version, I think. And so like putting it to the people and trying to think about it myself, like what is the use case? What is the reason? What are we doing with this power when it just like it doesn't feel like game developers, like this is a year when like one of the most discussed games is Vampire Survivors, which is an awesome video game. It's a great goddamn game. You should buy that game if you don't own it. It's outstanding. It is not going to meaningfully benefit from a 4090. It's just not. In fact, it runs great on Steam Deck. It's the game. That's the system seller for Steam Deck. Everyone talking about how like, oh yeah, I got a Steam Deck and now I play Vampire Survivors on it all the time. That's a great game. And yes, its price, I believe, is going to go up relatively soon. So act now. Seriously, it is one of the best games of the year. Act now. And so in a world where we have all these amazing indie games and all these other games that are going for style over just straight up fucking polygon fill rate and all this other stuff, and the variety of graphical styles we see in video games nowadays, the things that used to drive PC graphics, the things that used to drive graphics forward, it's just not the same anymore. You know, the artistic end of things matters a lot more now than it did 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years. You know, when Quake 2 came out and you got that fucking new Voodoo, when you went and got your Voodoo 2 and it had colored lighting at a hardware level and you saw the way the colored lighting looked, your mind was blown. When you got your Voodoo 1 and you made the water transparent in Quake 1 and suddenly you could see players that were underwater and it gave you an actual unfair advantage, it was mind-blowing. Truly. I am not fucking with you. This is not like fucking some... When those cards came out, when 3D acceleration started to become the norm, it changed everything. And it was incredible. And over the years, we have seen amazing leaps. And I do believe in ray tracing. I do think that ray tracing is really cool and something that, you know, when it gets implemented in a more standard way, it's something that more developers will be able to take advantage of, because it's just like, let the hardware do the lighting and we don't have to think about it as hard, or we think about it in a different way that is maybe slightly easier than baking in all of this and that and all this other stuff. And so I think ray tracing has the potential to be super cool, all the reflections, all that other stuff. It's really neat. But it's not the colored lighting in Quake 2. Actually, maybe it is the colored lighting in Quake 2. It is not the transparent water in Quake 1. I will say that. And so I'm just having trouble like looking at the landscape right now for video games and looking at the games that are coming up and looking at where we are in terms of like, what sort of hardware targets are we looking at for games for the foreseeable future? Because we've got the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X out there. Those are relatively set specs. We're probably not going to see an upgraded version of those for a little bit yet. And the architecture is what it is, and we probably won't see that get replaced for quite some time. It seems like, if anything, this console generation will be dragged on even longer because of the shortages, making it hard to get them. And, you know, they want to achieve mass market status with these things. And so they will want to drag it out for as long as they possibly can. And you've got developers that probably don't want to have to spend even more money making even higher res art assets. No one's out there going like, man, I can't wait until we can fucking start making these games in 8K because it'll be so much easier. No, it'll be even fucking harder. Like, generating art for big budget games is fucking hard, and they go and they outsource that stuff to rooms full of people, warehouses full of people. And so you just don't get the impression that the people are itching for that forward movement right now. And even if it does, you will have developers that still have to target a wide range of PC hardware, but also B, the consoles. And the consoles are going to be that kind of set target of just like, well, we need to make sure we run properly on the consoles because we're looking to sell stuff there. And if we can squeeze out more juice to make this PC version look better, then let's do it. But it just doesn't feel like even the biggest budget games, even the big games, are true graphical powerhouses in that sense. In the hardware, in the horsepower kind of sense. You know, we've seen a ton of great art. The artistic aspect of game design and game graphics has taken a real front seat as things have kind of, I don't know, it just feels like things are a little flat on the technical end of things. And so when Nvidia comes out and says like, fuck you, we're going to get this, now this runs 4 times as good. Do you want to run Cyberpunk 4 times as good? No, I want them to fix 4 times of the bugs that are still in Cyberpunk. like brute forcing it to run at an even better frame rate, like sure, why not? It runs fine on my 3090, and it runs fine on a wide range of cards. I started playing that game on a 2080, and it ran acceptably well there, even with some ray tracing stuff turned on. You know, it's weird because I love a nice smooth high frame rate, and so I do put some stock into that style of visual that you can really only get out of a graphics card upgrade and all that other stuff. But also, this one feels like, again, it doesn't feel like we've gotten all the juice out of the 30 series. It feels like developers are still maybe not pushing games so hard or in interesting ways, I guess. I don't know, because like the game that kind of became the weird benchmark around the time that I got my 3090 was The Last Watch Dogs, because it had this really elaborate benchmark mode where you could tweak all of the settings for ray tracing and this and that, and it would go through it would play through this whole thing, and then it would come back and show you the frame rates, and it would actually start to talk to you about where the bottlenecks were. It was like, hey, this is happening because this setting is too high for your current CPU. This setting is causing frame rate loss because you just don't have enough VRAM. This one, you need that, so it's like a graphics card upgrade is going to handle this stuff, but you need a CPU upgrade for this. And so at the start of this generation, it felt like a lot of the talk was not around GPU. It was really starting to happen around CPU and around multi-core and around like, okay, now that these consoles are going to go multi-core, now we're really going to see engines start to be built around the idea and optimized around the idea that everyone has a multi-core CPU. And so we're going to have all these multi-threaded things happening, and that's going to be the leap. And I just, again, I'm not an expert on the technical end of this stuff, I'll say. It just doesn't feel like that leap happened. It felt like the pandemic happened, and a lot of things just feel like, hey, we've made a better looking one of those. We've made that, you have your moments where you see a thing that looks truly next gen, but what are those moments? What are the things that you think of over the last couple of years here? Let's say like since the consoles came out. What are the things that you've seen that you go like, man, A, that wasn't possible before, and B, that's badass. To me, it's like the load times in Ratchet and Clank. And that might be it. I agree with people, Ray said Victory in the chat says DLSS has been awesome. And yes, DLSS and, FSR, like all that sort of stuff, that concept, that technology concept of like AI up-resing a game to look higher res than it was, and finding new ways to achieve better image quality through, smart techniques like that. I think that stuff's really fascinating, and that stuff can go a long way. But does that always look like, is that always something that you look at and go like, that's a huge leap forward? Like if you get under the hood and dig about stuff, you go like, yes, that's smart technology that's helping us get more out of what we have. But what's out there recently, and we'll talk just visually here, but like, no, across the board, like, some people said the haptics and stuff on the PlayStation 5 controller, like, yeah, that's something that feels different and more modern than it has in the past. I don't think enough games support it, but it's neat. But like, what are we doing? It felt like, and there was a lot of talk around in the, of course, the Xbox has its fast storage, but like even on the PlayStation 5, where you do have games that are optimized around it the way Ratchet and Clank is, most of the games coming out on PlayStation 5 still have meaningful load times because they're being made by third-party developers who are accommodating multiple platforms. And so they're not just building for the fast PlayStation 5 SSD. They're like, well, this is also coming out on PC, and people might not even have a fucking SSD there. So our engine needs to be built to be able to handle all of that shit. And it'll also come out on Xbox, which is very fast. And And Windows, obviously, what with the direct storage stuff, you know, is there a game on PC that even takes advantage of that stuff? I honestly don't know the answer. I'll have to look that up. The idea that like you're doing like what, like these zero copy operations or whatever it is. But yeah, it just seems like we're not truly realizing the power of a new console generation right now. And so I think that it doesn't feel like we're butting up against the edge of graphics technology and like, man, these new cards are going to come out and change everything. Like these new cards are going to come out and then like all the people who said like RTX isn't quite ready yet will go like, okay, now this is a card that can run all this RTX shit at an acceptable frame rate by hook or by crook. It gets there. And that's cool. And so like that conversation will probably change, and we'll see if that leads to greater adoption of that type of ray tracing. You know, they showed Portal with RTX support. That's cool. That's neat. But yeah, it's another weird highlight on just how unsettlingly weird the video game industry feels to me right now. You know, that like this stuff has moved forward. We talked about, you know, the consoles and how sometimes it just doesn't even feel like this generation has gotten started. And now you've got Nvidia out there going like, we've got another graphics card and it's $1,600. And what's it going to do? Look at these graphs. All these numbers go higher. And it's the same thing they say every time. But I don't know. When I got my 3090, and that was a bump up from a 2080. And so, but when I got that 3090, I was like, you know what? This feels like a good step. Like the ray tracing stuff runs better. And generally speaking, I turn a game all the way up and it runs nice. And if it's not running nice, it's the power of G-Sync is making me not notice how funky it maybe is running. But yeah, it's just, we feel like we're in such a weird this everything feels so weird to me right now, you know. And we've got games that are meant to last years and years and years that are not going to get the graphical overhaul to fully take advantage of this stuff, you know. Live games that have been running for a while. How long did it take World of Warcraft before they finally like rebuilt it and said like, hey, we're going to make this game look better? And then they did, but also it's not like it looked modern. They didn't update it in a way that you were like, oh, this is totally on par with this game. Looks like it came out yesterday. It was like, no, this looks like it's taking advantage of graphical technology that simply did not exist in 2004. 2004? 2004. And so, yeah, I don't know. We feel, to me, it just feels like we're in this really strange spot where like games keep getting delayed and the idea that anything's going to ship is still weird. And then when it does ship and it's broken and you just go like, yeah, well, it's been a hell of a few years and everything just still feels off. And so all that combined makes it even easier to get into a lot of these smaller indie games that are going for pixel art styles, different art styles, hand-drawn styles, like all these different things that are not just, yo, dog, look at this lighting. It's sick. Because those games don't come with that baggage right now, you know? And those games still run great on a fucking Switch. So what does that mean? What does it all mean? It means that like justifying the purchase of a 4090, I think, is a really weird thing. I think there are going to be people that are in specific buckets where they have not upgraded in a long time, or they're extremely interested in the AI aspect of it and they want to crank out naked John Cena's all day long as fast as possible, which I understand. Or they are, you know, going to be involved in video rendering and they are somehow stuck on the Windows platform because, you know, I think it seems like if you want to render video quickly, wouldn't you go get an M2 or something? I mean, shit. That stuff's chewing through stuff. But maybe this blows that away. We'd have to look at benchmarks. But like, yeah, the kind of non-gaming aspects of this card seem like really good. And that's stuff that I would probably benefit from to a certain extent. There's a new generation of NVENC on these cards. We'll see how that impacts the streaming community when they get their hands on that, and what that does, what that can do. I don't know that it'll end up being a hugely meaningful change, but we'll see. But yeah, there's just a wide range of cards out there now from even, let's say, 2 generations back now that still feel very viable for modern games. And so the idea of a 4090 just feels really strange. Either way, yeah, we'll see what AMD is up to in November 3rd. They'll have their stuff. I have not been, and I have not seen any in person, I guess I should say, but just from the way the numbers add up and all this other stuff, and my desire to just be willing to overspend on stuff when it comes to building a computer, the AMD GPUs have not really, have never really struck me as like something I was that interested in. But I think for certain types of consumers, like this opens the door for AMD to come through with something, loosely competitive that also hits a really sweet spot on the price stuff. So we'll see. Hell, maybe we'll see some fucking Lex Luger ass shit, some fucking Rick Rude shaving the mustache shit, and you will see EVGA walk out on the AMD stage. Who the fuck knows? AMD, the first Monday Nitro, and here comes EVGA out the fucking tunnel. Like, I don't know. Anyway, that's I don't know. That's graphics card talk. Let's get on to something that really matters. And these are all, let's get into games that are truly going to look their best on a 4090. Konami has announced the winners of a contest to revive some of its old franchises. If you remember, they put out a list of IP a long time ago and said, hey, we're taking pitches and we will give you some money to make some games. This is a year-long process, according to IGN. And so Konami has announced the grand prize winner of an open call for indie developers to revive older series from the company's back catalog. So these are old series. This is not like, hey, pitch us on the next Castlevania. This is like, hey, pitch us on the fucking craziest fucking MSX franchises. Make a new fucking Penguin dodgeball game for us or whatever. And so the winner has ended up being Takumi Nakamura, the director of La Mulana and La Mulana 2. And his pitch was to remake a game called The Maze of Gallius, which is an MSX game. All right, well, it came to Famicom as well, actually. But it is a sequel to a game called Nightmare. That's Nightmare with a K, that came out on the MSX. And this is the game that Nakamura has cited as the inspiration for La Mulana. So it's like, for him, I'm sure it's this awesome thrill of like, oh man, I've made these couple of games, but like La Mulana is like super well thought of. So it's like kind of weird in a way that this like now kind of known developer is like going to make this like fan, official fan remake. Anyway, I'm sure he's very excited about it. It is a game that, so according to IGN, the MSX version of Maze of Gallius did make it to Europe. So there is an English version out there. And in a press release announcing the winners, the panel of contest judges wrote, they could feel tremendous passion for the Maze of Gallius in Naramura's initial proposal. And he said that even if he didn't win the contest, he would probably just stay quiet and make it anyway. So, but yes, this is a game that was one of the influences for La Mulana. And so he is going to go on to make that. And that's kind of neat. We'll see how that goes. Like, the business terms on that don't sound, just don't sound awesome. But I don't know. So Naramura's entry won the contest, but 4 runners up were also awarded prizes for their ideas. I assume that means that those games are going to happen. And so those pitches were for Star Soldier Parodius, which is crazy, Twin Bee, which the idea of okay, and Puyan. That's right. Puyan. Someone's going to make a new Puyan. I hope that the winner of the Puyan I hope that the Puyan entrant were the developers at Cellar Door, the developers of Rogue Legacy, because Rogue Legacy 1 had a really touching homage to Puyan in there. So yeah, they did list the, oh man, there's a logo for a new Puyan game on the official page for this. That's pretty nuts. And so there's a bit of details in Japanese on the game creators camp page that I will perhaps translate myself later using artificial intelligence, the power of the 3090. No, so yeah, hopefully these other games get made. It would be really cool. Like Star Soldier, Parodius, and Twinbee. Like, yeah, let's see some fucking shooters. Parodius and Twinbee, like the huge classics. Puyan also technically, I suppose, a shooter. Yeah, I think that's super exciting. There's a quote here from Naramura that says, I was watching last year's TGS when this contest was announced, and I thought there's no way the Maze of Gallius will be on the list, but there it was. I hurriedly contacted my teammates to find out what we should do. I think most people saw that list and said, Gradius, that's cool. Goemon, I like that. So they might be disappointed that Gallius was selected. Yeah. Maybe, but whatever. That's great. Well, it's great. Hopefully, I mean, you know, hopefully the business terms are not very limiting in that. That seems like a situation where Konami could really fuck people over. So yeah. Also announced at TGS at the Tokyo Game Show, hella Yakuza games. In fact, they announced so many Yakuza games that they said, fuck it, we're not going to call them Yakuza games anymore. The Yakuza franchise will now, from here on out, be known as the Like a Dragon franchise, which you saw on that last entry that came along. Like a Dragon, of course, is the... I at first was like, wait, that's a weird name. Why would they go? And I was like, oh, right, that's the literal translation of the Japanese names of this franchise. They did not call it Yakuza in Japan. They announced 3 games, 1 remake and 2 new games. What do we got? We've got Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name. This is a spin-off that'll, as according to Video Games Chronicle, will take place between Yakuza 6 and 7, and this will be the story of what happened to Kiryu. This will also lead into Like a Dragon 8, which will have Kiryu and Ichiban as kind of twin protagonists. They're saying this will be the biggest one of these games to date, and it will hit in 2024. And then the remake is for Like a Dragon Ishin, which is the game kind of set in the 1800s. This was the like end of the samurai era game, but they are doing a remake of it. This game came out in 2014 for PlayStation 3 and 4, and they're kind of recasting it using the bigger names, the bigger characters that were in Yakuza 6 and 7. Like a Dragon 6 and 7, I'm sorry. And so that's a lot of this. There is some real strike while the iron is hot going on here, where they're like, wait, people around the world suddenly like these games? Fuck. Let's get it going. Let's make it happen. And so they are making it happen with 3 games. Also, Judgment and Lost Judgment came out on Steam, kind of got announced and then released all at the same time. And I guess some modders were digging into it and discovered. So if you remember correctly, one of the reasons that game seemed to not be coming to PC was because of Johnny's, the idol agency that was responsible for like one of the characters in the game, didn't want that character being depicted as, I don't know, having random sex with Conan O'Brien or, you know, whatever models you've ripped out of other games. And so they were holding off on putting them out on PC. And sure enough, I guess these modders did discover that the files were encrypted in a different way than than previous games in the franchise, so that maybe they tried to keep those models from getting ripped out. But it sounds like people have already defeated that and found ways to rip the models. So fuck you, Johnny's. Anyway, a lot happening out of that studio. Yeah, just crazy. I I guess this is like Sega's premier franchise by a long shot now, right? This is the game with ties to old Sega. This is the one, right? This is the one that made it. It's not Shenmue. It's not, what else? It's not Rez. Rez is still being made, maybe. Hopefully we'll see a Rez sequel here. It's just so weird to me that, like, this franchise toiled for so long and did not catch on in the US at all. And it's awesome to see it catching on. And also, I think the games that they have been making, let's say since like Yakuza 0 came out, I think that they have just been really stepping up their game and making these games better and more appealing to more people. So I think the audience kind of met them halfway. The games kept getting better. The audience kept broadening their horizons a bit worldwide. And we eventually kind of met in the middle on this stuff to where suddenly this just feels like it's Sega's Sega's biggest non-Sonic franchise that still has roots in, all the way back to the PlayStation 2. If not the Dreamcast, I mean, if you want to consider Shenmue as like the blueprint that allowed this franchise to exist, which technically true. It's interesting. And like all those games sound relatively exciting. I think some people have been a little lukewarm on the notion that Kiryu is coming back because it felt like he kind of got his send off, and even having a separate game that is kind of explaining what he was doing along the way seems like that would be a good way to send him off. But then we'll see how he is represented in this upcoming game in Like a Dragon 8. Like a Dragon, it doesn't roll off the tongue well. Like a Dragon 8. It's weird. I like it. I like it. It's weird. But yes, Like a Dragon 8 will be an RPG. It will kind of be more like the other Ichiban game, from the sounds of things. And Like a Dragon Gaiden will be kind of more in the traditional action adventure style, but they're also saying that as it's kind of a side story, as it is a Gaiden, it will be about half the size of a regular game in the franchise. So that all sounds cool. I don't know. I feel like in a different situation, this would be met with a certain amount of cynicism, but these games have been really good for a while now. And I think the idea that they're bringing them over and all this other stuff is exciting. Hopefully all these games are great and they can kind of keep it rolling. We'll see how it goes. Last week, they finally just kind of locked down the Street Fighter 6 launch lineup. They also talked about a network test, a closed beta coming up, a little CBT if you're into that, and showed off a crazy mode with items with almost looked like Tekken volleyball or something like that, but a silly mode, extreme battle, I believe it's called. But then also said, here are the characters this game is launching with, and it is 18 characters according to Polygon. So basically this was them getting out and announcing 7 characters all at once, which is funny considering how they were like, oh, we're just going to announce one and here, one there, and one here. And, but they're like, nah, fuck it. Let's see. That means the full roster, the 7 names that had yet to be confirmed, according to Polygon, are Manon, Marissa, Lily, JP, DJ, Cammy, and Zangief. And 11 characters had been previously announced, and even 4 of those had been released, earlier that week. And that is Luke, Jamie, Kimberly, Juri, Ryu, E Honda, Blanca, Guile, Ken, Chun-Li, and Dulcim. So the original 8 characters of Street Fighter 2 will all be here. We'll see DJ and Cammy from Super, and Juri from Street Fighter 4. And then the rest are new. Well, Luke is technically not a new character, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. 18 characters sounds good. The Blanca stuff with him setting down little Blanca dolls and electrifying them and making them fly in directions is an interesting change for Blanca. I don't know if that's. I don't like to play the characters that have like landmines and weird stuff you set down and have to think about, with the exception of Cyrax. Generally, I'm not into that sort of stuff, but that's an interesting change. It will hopefully freshen up Blanca a little bit. Polygon does note that there was a big leak back in June that had even more characters on it. It had 4 additional ones. Rashid, which that'd be cool. Ed, Aki or AKI, and Akuma. And Owen over at Polygon speculates maybe are they the first 4 DLC characters? Which maybe they could be. Maybe they could be. Rashid is cool. I'm glad to see him come back. Put a con in this game. How many times do I need to say that out loud before we put that greasy, oiled up motherfucker back into this game? Put a con in this game. We need to oil up. We need to get very wet. We need to get very slick. We need to lube up for fighting games. Oh. Damn it. All right. Well, let's see. Yeah, and they did not necessarily nail down a date for the game. It is still just a 2023 game. But, that beta is happening. I want to say that's October. So if we think about they are done announcing characters for the launch lineup. They are looking to have a network test very soon. Or relatively soon. They need to put this game out before Evo. So that's like August. Something like that, right? What month of the year did Street Fighter V come out? Let's type that in right now and look. I am curious. February. That sounds like a good time. Some kind of like mid Q1 release date. Yeah, Rec Roulette in the Discord says Capcom Cup is December. So maybe they roll out a playable like they probably let people at Capcom Cup or like let some of that stuff, let some things happen in December or something like that. But yeah, that's probably a Q1 game. Especially, gosh, if you start to assume that NetherRealm, and this is again, I am trying desperately to connect dots here that are maybe not there, but given the timing, one would assume is not the right word. I would say expect. I think NetherRealm will announce a game at the Game Awards and it will ship in April. That is my. It feels like it is time for that. April is very much their month. They also will want to get a game out before Evo, and they don't want to put it out right at Evo because they want it to be part of Evo, which means they have to get it out, let people get good at it, do some balance patches, all that other stuff. So those games can't ship too late in the year. So yeah, maybe we end up seeing Street Fighter in like a February, and then you end up seeing NetherRealm's game in April. I don't know. But what I do know is that everything they show on Street Fighter 6 looks great. Everything they show about the big long story mode and battle, like all the stuff they're showing for the different modes of that game, I think look outstanding. It just feels like they learned some lessons last time out and said, yeah, we don't want anyone to ever be able to look at our game and say this is not a good value or this feels like it is missing features or whatever at launch. This feels like them sitting down and going like, okay, because they set the wrong tone for Street Fighter V right out of the gate. They leaned too hard into the competitive scene. They leaned too hard into the Evo crowd for a franchise that is capable of selling to so many more people if they can check off some more boxes to make that a better game for more people to play. And so that just feels like a huge misstep for them, a huge, huge problem. This game feels like a direct response to that, but also this from playing it a while back and kind of watching some of the additional gameplay since then and all this other stuff. Like, I am very excited for this game, which, given, I was very hopeful for Street Fighter V, and then it came out, and but like that came out with like caveats already, because you're like, well, it doesn't have a story mode, it'll have one later, I guess, and just the choices they made around that game at launch, I think really set it back, and it did not dig itself out of that hole. People can shout up and down, they can run up and down the streets and say, oh, they fixed all that stuff, and oh, it was a great game by the time they were done. But like, in terms of it being this, like, this is fucking Street Fighter 2. This isn't fucking random anime fighter fucking 37. This is not DNF fucking Duel. It's goddamn Street Fighter. It's fucking, they made G.I. Joe shaped figurines for this fucking thing. They put out the Jean-Claude Van Damme. Like, this is goddamn Street Fighter. This is one of the biggest franchises in all of gaming. This is not, yeah, we'll put in the story mode later. This is, we've got a large audience of players of all skill levels and interest levels, and we need to cater to the people that want to go play it like it's a fucking sport, but we cannot ignore the much larger audience of people that just want to see what the fuck Ken's doing. What's this guy up to? What's up with this Ken guy anyway? And they just never got around to serving that wider audience. And by the time they did, that wider audience had either moved on and never picked it up, or they picked it up and went like, and never really came to the game. And so this just seems like a much smarter approach, a much more respectful approach, not only for the franchise itself, but for its players. It is just better all around. And I, in playing it, I think it plays, it seems like a very exciting game from a gameplay perspective, and I can't wait to see more people play it. I can't wait to get my hands on it again. I'm bummed. I did have an opportunity to check out, I guess, what would have been the TGS build, but was not able to go see it. And yeah, like, I was like, fuck. That was actually like when I was starting this whole thing up, one of my biggest concerns was, shit, man, I was just about to book an appointment to go see Street Fighter 6. I wonder if I can still pull that together. Will they still see me if I'm on my own? Will they do this, all that? And everyone was super accommodating, and I was able to go see it and all this stuff. But like, that was that was one of the biggest things for me starting up this adventure, was like, shit, man, I wonder if I can go see Street Fighter. Fuck. Because I was booking appointments under different pretenses before, and now I need to, and so, yeah, very, very excited for that game. I hope that it comes out well. I hope that it finds new ways to cater to a bigger audience as time goes on, because that's always the problem with a fighting game, is no matter what, over time, it's just the funnels, you're going to find more and more people that are just better and better at the game, and so people coming in fresh and trying to play online, they're only going to get matched up with murderers. And that's a very natural thing to happen. It's a very normal thing to happen. But I think if games can find ways to fight against that, it seems like the best way to fight against that is to make your game free to play, which I don't think Street Fighter is necessarily ready to do. But then you have a limitless number of new players you could get rolling through the door for no money. So, we'll see. Anyway, that's going to do it for news. Yeah, a weird TGS in general. There were some announcements. Obviously, the Suikoden remake stuff happened and all that sort of stuff. It did not feel like a huge show for announcements. We had the Street Fighter details and some other Capcom stuff, and then you had this Konami stuff, and you had the Sega, the Like a Dragon stuff, but it did not feel like a massive. Well, I guess the PlayStation VR 2 stuff I don't think happened as a result of TGS, but I think it kind of happened in that time frame, probably because they were gonna let Japanese media see it there or something like that. But yeah, TGS didn't necessarily feel like a massive thing, and I think the thing I saw the most of coming out of TGS, the most photos and screenshots and all this other stuff, were from people really blown away at the size of the presence for the Steam Deck at TGS. They came up with a little mascot. They had a gigantic Steam Deck on the show floor. They had Steam Deck set up, letting people play games on the old Steam Deck, doing that stuff. I guess some people saw Forspoken a little bit before the show. Maybe that was but you know, little bits and pieces, but it didn't feel like a massive, like, boom, here's this news drop. I mean, the biggest news coming out of TGS was that, you know, that Fanbyte got fucked over. You know, that Imran Khan got stuck, like, woke up in Japan with no job. You know, that bullshit. That felt bigger than anything that happened there game-wise. Man, what a fucking crazy, yeah. This business is some absolute bullshit sometimes. Some absolute bullshit. Why don't we get into some emails? Your emails. You send them to podcast@guard.bike, and then I will check them out, and so on and so forth. And I am just going to, with some 3 new ones came in recently. We will maybe take a look at those. And then you send in your emails, and then I check them out, and then this music is played. Okay. Let's see here. I'm looking back through the long list of saved emails. Taylor writes in and says, I recently received the Steam Deck I ordered, and I am in love with it like most people. The first thing I did was load up emulators and went down a rabbit hole of nostalgia, so on and blah, blah, blah. One of the first games was Need for Speed Underground 2. I was in love with it all over again until I wasn't. I realized I played the shit out of that game when I was younger, and the gameplay loop isn't holding me like it did, probably because I did it to death already. That was the last Need for Speed game I played. As life got in the way, taste changed, and junk. But it turns out I still love racing games. What other Need for Speed games would you recommend? Doesn't matter what era or system, would love your input. Man. You know, I think Need for Speed Most Wanted, that launched alongside the Xbox 360 and features one Razor Callahan, is an awesome game. I think the other Need for Speed Most Wanted that they then rebooted and moved in a different direction with, I think that is also a tremendous Need for Speed game. And what is it? Payback? No, Hot Pursuit. Is that the other one that they did another one of those? But that's the Hot Pursuit is really contingent on you finding other people to play multiplayer with. And that Most Wanted reboot, the second Most Wanted, really benefits from having other people to play with as well. Yeah, Hot Pursuit also. Yeah. Jones in the chat is saying, I think Heat is worth picking up on a sale. Need for Speed Heat, Need for Speed has fallen on really, they fell on dark days with Need for Speed over the course of the last console generation. I think that they really got into this whole idea of a connected world, multiplayer, and all of this sort of stuff that didn't... Yeah, Need for Speed Heat is on PlayStation Plus this month. So if you can get it there, get it there. But yeah, the last decade, the last handful of years has really been rough for Need for Speed. I think that they set off in the wrong direction and had a really hard time capitalizing on some of the decisions they made. In terms of, they had games where you were in a connected world and then you could use your phone to call in spike strips on other players, even if you weren't near them, which was weird. And it's just been a very rough patch for Need for Speed for coming up on a decade. Actually, probably a little bit more than a decade, if we really want to be honest here. I think that there was none of the Need for Speed games on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One were good games. I think that whole generation is a lost generation for Need for Speed. It's not to say they're unplayable or anything like that. It just, the direction they went off in was very bland. Sometimes they would get into just like weird loot boxy kind of parts with, your car part upgrades and all this other stuff that felt weird more recently. And yeah, it's just, they lost it. Whatever they had during the 360 PS3 generation, they lost it. And even then, they didn't always have those. It's not like every one of those games was an absolute banger either. They had a handful of, they had 3 good ones over the course of that generation. And yeah, they remember they released that one where they were kind of trying to reboot it and they put a bunch of FMV in it. Was that just called Need for Speed? They actually just called it like the Need for Speed or whatever again, right? They tried to kind of reboot it, and they had all these like real life, this person's a real car person in here, and it's like, no wonder the acting is such shit. It's just rough, man. Just fucking rough. And so that's, I saw a 2-second clip of the upcoming Need for Speed that I guess leaked out of some Discord somewhere. EA is always running different at-home tests and alphas and betas and all this other stuff. Like, that's how all that skate footage leaked out. Well, then a build leaked out, but like they ran another skate one recently, and I saw a bunch of footage of that. And I came away from watching illicit footage of skate saying, holy shit, I can't wait to play that game. Like, they really seem like they're on the right track with that. The clip of Need for Speed was just like a car going over a jump and not making it and looking kind of funky. And like looking at that, I was like, well, you can't really glean too much from this incredibly short clip. But that clip did look nice. So I don't know. I don't know what they need to do to make Need for Speed matter. Like, could you, they tried the FMV route again that worked so well for that first Most Wanted game. And, that game sucked. I just think, in terms of progression and repetitiveness and things you do in an open world, I think that, the Forza Horizon games have just become better at being open world driving games where you just have a lot of fun. Like, yeah, you do a bunch of races and you do all this stuff. And honestly, in Horizon, sometimes the races are the least interesting part for me, but they make the world so interesting and fun to just explore that it ends up being a good time. And so but at the same time, that franchise exists now and has that Forza Horizon has been around for 10. I read this and I was like, that can't be true. And then I didn't look it up. So before I hit you with this and make you feel bad. Yeah. Forza Horizon is 10 years old this year. It came out in October 2012. The new Forza sub-series is now also 10 years old, which kind of coincides with a lot of the downfall in Need for Speed. Like, Forza Horizon was always there to try to pick up the slack for what an open world racing game could be and all that other stuff. But there's only been 5 of them. It's not like they were doing it annually, at least, for Forza Horizon. I don't know what you do with Need for Speed at this point. Because Forza Horizon is doing a lot of the things that the last generation of Need for Speed, a lot of those games tried to do, of just like, here's an open world game, you're going to encounter other human players in it, and you can have some kind of interactions with them, and you can line up to race and race them. Like, the blueprint is not that different, but I think Forza Horizon does a lot better with off-road stuff, does a lot better with their environments. I think their open worlds have generally been a lot better. I think they've had some okay story stuff around the festival and how the festival expands. That stuff works pretty well, both from a progression standpoint and from a storytelling standpoint, insofar as you want storytelling in a driving game. And so, like, Forza Horizon does all of the things that last generation of Need for Speed game was trying to do, just better. And I don't know what you go to now. I don't know what, if you're trying to, like, what's the next generation? What's the next big iteration? What's the big change for Need for Speed going forward? I honestly don't know what you do. unless you're going to throw out the licensed car stuff and make a Burnout game. And that's what I would like to see, personally. What if the cars crashed real good? What if the cars fucked each other up real well? You know? That would be cool. But yeah. Yeah, it's weird. Spencer from Boulder, Colorado writes in and says, I was thinking, partially due to Game Boys to Men, about the smaller consoles and hardware that never really competed with the larger manufacturers at the time, like NEC, 3DO, anything made by Atari after the 2600, and etc. I was wondering if you had any insight as to why these have more or less dried up, or any recent attempts are likely some sort of grift or money laundering scheme that ends in vaporware like the Coleco Chameleon or the Intellivision Amico. Do you think we'll ever see a resurgence in these smaller, also-ran manufacturers, or are they gone for good? Are we better off without them, or are we missing out on some gems that come along only due to these consoles trying to penetrate the market? I think the market can only support so many different major players at a time, and I think we're at the limit. I think you would have to really have, I mean, you know, for all intents and purposes, the PlayStation and the Xbox are kind of the same thing. Obviously, you know, they have their exclusive games, but they're both taking pretty similar approaches. You know, Game Pass is very different from PlayStation Plus's thing, but generally speaking, those two consoles are competing for the same audience. So a third one of those would not get you anywhere. The Switch is targeting kind of its own thing. Nintendo has gotten much better over the years at extricating itself from the rat race, from the hardware rat race, from the fill rate rat race, from the, like, we've got the most powerful box on the block. Like, Nintendo has gotten really good at sidestepping all of that stuff. Really, I mean, you know, with the GameCube was probably the last time they had a competitive console, right? Because the GameCube was capable of looking better than a PlayStation 2. Maybe not quite as good as an Xbox, but it was right there. They were all relatively similar machines, you know. So you had ports that looked roughly the same across all three machines. But ever since then, like, Nintendo has been like, okay, you guys are going to go get into the chip making business and be super fucking weird. We're going to make a remote control and take over the world. And so they went off into their weird corner, and their corner has only gotten weirder and more differentiated since, which is kind of why the third party story on Nintendo platforms is always so weird, because you've got developers who are like, yeah, but we already made this game for these other two machines, and now you're telling us we have to do a bunch of custom work to get a version on your machine, and then on top of that, people who buy your machine only want to play your games on it, and so our game's not going to sell all that well anyway. Why are we going to put in the work to do this? Why are we even doing this? You know, and so it becomes a hard story. But yeah, I think that in the 16-bit era, with the Genesis, the SNES, and the TurboGrafx felt very much like an also ran, like it was something that, like, did not compete in terms of marketing, in terms of market presence, in terms of the games that were coming out, all that other stuff. They were just like, the software library was not as expansive. The third-party support in the States was not as real as it was for the SNES and the Genesis. And so even then, it started feeling like this market can only really support two major players. And, you know, then Microsoft got in and found a way to stick. You know, that was, again, you know, when the Xbox was first coming out, it seemed like a joke. It seemed like, oh, you guys are going to crash and burn. Halo looks cool. It's unfortunate that you're bringing the Dead or Alive franchise down, screaming, burning with you on this endeavor. But hey, okay, go ahead and put your thing out. And they put it out, and they actually did a really good job. And, you know, the original Xbox is a weird, disaster is not the right word, but, you know, it was Dreamcast-esque in its exit from the market. But also, Microsoft is a big enough company that they learned a lot. They learned it very quickly, and the Xbox 360 came out and changed a lot of things. And made that services thing matter, which in a lot of ways is the most major change to gaming in 15 years or so was the okay, we're building in Xbox Live, we're building in these central profiles and friends lists, and online gaming is more of a standard, and all that sort of stuff. Like the stuff they did building Xbox Live for the 360, or even building it for the original Xbox and then building it for real on the 360. That's the biggest change we've seen, and since games went polygonal, really. So I just don't think the market can really support more than that. And you see weird machines come and go, right? I mean, the Playdate came out. Obviously, it's a very different market. The Atari VCS came out. They tried to make that a console, even though it's running Linux under the hood, and you can install Windows on it and do whatever else. Like, they attempted to put the Atari VCS out and market it like it was something, but it's not. I still occasionally get a press release here and there claiming that a new game is coming to the VCS, and it's very confusing. The Amico, I still don't think the Amico is ever going to come out. I know that's a bold claim. Sorry for these hot takes so late in the show. Holy shit. Back the fuck up. But I also don't think that the people making the Amico set out to intentionally mislead people. I think that they went into that attempting to do exactly what they said they were going to do, and then at some point realized just how fucking hard that was, and then on top of that had to deal with the pandemic and everything else. And so, I don't even necessarily believe, because you still do see some statements out of the Amico camp. I mean, what's left of it? Like, it's like a guy, like they shut down their office, and later, and a bunch of people are not there anymore, and all this other stuff. And so, but I don't necessarily, like their attempts to raise money don't necessarily seem like intentionally built to deceive. They just seem like that there's a lot of self-deception happening in terms of like what the real market prospects are for that thing and it coming out. And it's you got to be crazy. You got to be a believer in your own weird thing to make your own weird thing make it out to market. And maybe there are still some people that believe that, and hopefully they're not just out there trying to grift. But that whole thing seemed like a fucking bad idea to begin with, or it seemed very misled. It's the sort of thing that, like, when you heard their pitch for like what they wanted to, we want to do this family friendly gaming, and we want to, all these games are going to only cost this much money, and we're not going to allow this type of DLC, and this paid this and that, and like the reaction to that was just, you wanted to just pat their head and go, oh, you sweet summer child. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. Go off and yes, start your lemonade stand and put out your own television, honey. Dinner will be ready in a few hours. Like the whole thing just always seemed like completely out of step with reality. So even if they did pull it off, it never seemed like that was going to suddenly be like a major player or something like that. But like what they were saying in terms of just like, hey, we want to, like, yeah, I bet you do. That'd be great. Yeah, if you could pull that off, that would be, it's not a terrible idea. And then they went down the rabbit hole of like, like not necessarily even attacking people who were criticizing the console, but also cultivating a weird cult of people who, I think there are still some people out there that have not been told that the war is over, and they're still in the trenches somewhere talking about how you're going to all see when the Intellivision comes out just how fucking wrong you are. Like the very idea that they were able to cultivate. And maybe they, and that's where it gets conspiratorial, because then you're like, are they paying these fucking people to shill for the Intellivision? Because Jesus Christ, who would do this? And then that backs into a weird thing of like, well, the more they keep making hilarious videos about the unintentionally hilarious videos about how strong the Amico is going to be, the more views they're getting on YouTube. And so like, it's a dark cycle. I don't know. Look, every time you look at that thing, it is every bit the car crash you'd think it would be. And yeah, they announced that there's some of the games that they made for the Amico were going to come to some other platforms via licensing, and they're going to use that money to get the Amico out the door and all this other stuff. And it's like, yeah, cool. Yep, you should. That seems like the thing you would have to do to try to have a Hail Mary attempt at making this all happen. I just don't know that I believe that. I just don't know that I believe it's ever going to happen. It just doesn't. It just seems highly unlikely that we'll get there when it comes to the Amico. And again, I'm sorry for these bold fucking takes. Yeah. Bartek writes in. So we talked about Cyberpunk last week, and we talked about the number of weird bugs I still was finding in the patched version of the game. But also, I talked a little bit about the script and how the writing in it is very stilted and stunted and just comes across as like it's missing pronouns. Like, Keanu Reeves doesn't ever say the word I or you. He just says, gonna have to go do this. And it's just the weird broken nature of that script. And this person commented on the YouTube version of the podcast and said, hey, that's actually probably due to the developers of the game being Polish and the way the Polish language works in terms of how it builds in, which is something I had wondered if that was if that ended up being the case or not. That there was something about the language, because I think that game was originally written in English, but the Polish influence on the script seems like the thing that that maybe broke it. Yeah, but then, yeah, that's the other question I had, because I'm not innately familiar with it. But my question was, did Witcher 3 have that problem? And Dives in the chat says no, it did not. So maybe it was a victim of the game being weirdly rushed and out the door and all this other stuff, that like maybe that script needed another pass before they recorded the VO. But it's not just Keanu and V, which Fanzine in the Discord is saying it could just be because the two of them share a body, that maybe it would be something like that. But like other characters in the game do it as well. So it ends up just feeling, it just ends up coming off as like no human talks this way, and it ends up being really weird. So anyway, with that said, Bartek then wrote in. Said, I'm the guy who commented on your YouTube video, the Polish influences in the Cyberpunk script. I forgot to add one thing I think you may find interesting. When I point out to people that games like Cyberpunk 2077 were written by a fundamentally European team, and this is why it will always feel off to many, they tell me that Americans also worked and consulted on the game, and that they should have intervened and called out the weirdness. The thing is, explaining that something feels weird in this specific context is much harder than pointing out obvious mistakes. I'm getting the wrong vibe from this is not something you can just prove with one quick Google search. Why would you put your ass on the line to improve something a bit peculiar when the current version is technically correct and fully understandable? Especially that for many game genres, ESL speakers will be your main audience anyway. I'm weird, so I loved yelling at a Shakespearean-trained VO artist that normalcy is not just a silly mistake, but the correct form of normality in American English. But even if I like stress and conflict, I recognize that most people don't, and these compromises will always be made. AAA, AA video game dev teams are just too big and international to have completely coherent scripts. And just to be clear, I have 2 years of experience in the video game narrative design, in video game narrative design, and I left the industry over 3 years ago, so I'm not the ultimate expert or something. My perspective is interesting mostly because I didn't start learning English until I was 15, and over the subsequent 17 years, I slowly went from a complete newbie to a bilingual speaking English with my siblings. So yeah, it's yeah, it could have been that like people cited or knew that the script sounded weird but couldn't quite articulate why. Because I think I even have trouble articulating why. It just like it's something you look at and you go like, is that something you're doing for tone reasons? Because it seems fucking weird. And you're like, is it more cyberpunk to talk like this? I don't, what's the reasoning in a game where they've made up a bunch of words like choom and other ones that I have completely forgotten. maybe it was something that just kind of, oh, interesting. Cheese Holidays says that the anime does the same thing. Wow. I think I want to watch the anime, but you saying that the anime has that same problem makes me not want to watch the anime. Because it's so it feels like a yes, the Cosmic Fly says it sounds more gritty. You got no time for pronouns. It's I got to do this versus muttering in a low voice. Got to do this. The problem is they're not muttering it in a low voice. They're speaking slowly and clearly. And so the line delivery doesn't line up with that idea of like you're speaking fast and incredibly informally and all this other stuff. So instead, Keanu just comes off as, what are you going to do? Gotta do something. Like these, and that's not a good example. That's not an actual line from the game or whatever. I'm just trying to give an example here, but like the flow of the dialogue combined with that is where it falls apart. And so if they had better line delivery, if they had given, and maybe they were afraid to give Keanu direction because he's Keanu fucking Reeves. But he does not come off well in that game. I don't think. And it's because the way the dialogue is written. If he had performed it faster, snappier, all that sort of stuff, if the dialogue felt more like two people talking and not like video game dialogue character A talks, video game character dialogue B talks, video game character dialogue A makes a choice off a wheel to what they're going to say, video game character B responds. Like if it wasn't that, if it was a more fluid conversational thing, so maybe it would work in the anime a lot better, but it just, it's again, it's not like something, that game has much larger problems. Like if you fixed that, I think it'll just feel a lot more sane to me. But it's not going to make the story good. So it only goes so far. Ben in Boston points out, Like a Dragon Machine was originally released in Japan on 2014 on the PS3 and PS4. Next year, the remake will come out on PS4 and PS5, meaning both the original and its remake will have come out on the same system. Is this the first time a game has been remade for its original console? That seems weird somehow. I'm trying to think of any other examples of this, because this is weird. Like contextually, it was a PS3 game that came out on PS4 and it was a PS4 game that came out on PS5 or, like all that sort of stuff. Virtua Fighter 4? No, VF4 didn't originally. Oh, Spider-Man Remastered is also a PS4 game. Did they remaster the PS4 version? No, they didn't, right? Daytona for the Saturn. Yeah. Well, that was a case where that second version of Daytona had online support, right? So it was more focused on like, hey, we put out another version of Daytona that supports our weird modem. I mean, Spider-Man was PS4, but the remaster didn't come out on PS4. The remaster came out on PS5, right? They didn't rebrand it as Spider-Man Remastered when that came out. Did they? Final Fantasy 14, kinda. Yeah, sort of, kinda. The Last of Us? Did The Last of Us... They didn't... I mean, this new version of Last of Us didn't come out. No, and then the original version, it came out PS3, and then they re-released it on PS4, and then now Last of Us is out on PS5, right? That's the... But no, there's no case of like there are now two versions of this game on one platform. I mean, that sort of stuff happens on Steam all the time, where you have like Crimson Land got rebuilt for consoles, and then that version kind of came out on PC. But that's sort of a different story. Street Fighter 4, yeah, okay. Well, I mean, insofar as like an arcade edition, or but that's like the updated versions of Street Fighter 4 are not remasters or remakes of the game. It's just the game plus DLC. So Atelier Rorona got a remaster on PS3 and an original release. Okay, that sounds like it probably counts. Japan only games maybe have done this, like those Genki racing games. I could see it. Yeah, some Tokyo Extreme Battle, Tokyo Highway Battle, whatever it is, maybe. Outrun 2 and Outrun 2006. Yeah, those games have differences, but they're kind of... Isn't that a case where one is online and one's not? I think that might be how that works. Okay, let's see. Here is, Neva writes in. We'll say Neva. Of the 4 different names on this email, we'll go with Neva. And says, with EVGA pulling out of the market space, citing the unprofitability of Nvidia's GPU lines and Nvidia's now seemingly disastrous bet on the crypto market, leaving them with an extreme surplus and an MSRP that has priced most general consumers out of new cards as an affordability proposition, it seems like the market is on the verge of a collapse, if not a realignment. So this email came in before these graphics cards, before the 40 series got announced, for the record, but after VGA had started talking shit. So in that window. Rather than talking about the business side for a minute, I want to ask about the development side. With the increase in rasterization leading to a commensurate increase in price, it's not going to be as cost effective for a lot of developers to target max spec on a lot of titles. And as such, do you think that in the event of a GPU crash, the ever-determinate race of publishers and some developers for higher pixel density and more advanced lighting and texture models takes a backseat to us instead getting the most out of the horsepower of more limited cards that these teams know will be in much higher supply? And if they do, what impact do you think this will have on development of titles going forward, as obviously everything already in development is not going to rescope now? It's a good question. I think that it's a valid question, and I tend to look at new GPUs of this nature in terms of Nvidia will partner with some companies to do the DLSS 3 work, meaning they will cover the costs or co-marketing, whatever. They will find ways to make developers want to do that work when it comes to creating showpieces for their graphics cards. But yeah, if you go, yes, and multiple people are pointing out, hey, go look at the Steam survey and try to get a sense of what the average graphics card is these days. I think this is the sort of thing that like developers look at it and probably go like, well, okay, people who buy new graphics cards, they will get better frame rates out of it. But like what we're targeting is our max spec is not going to be bleeding edge hardware. It's going to be a couple steps down. And you saw some weird thrashing around, like like the release of Watch Dogs. Like at the time, it felt like Watch Dogs Legion was not, and maybe it was just an optimization problem, but it felt like they were targeting hardware that didn't even exist yet, because once I got my fucking extremely fast CPU and GPU, I still couldn't turn it all the way up without it going like, there's some stuff. It could maybe run a little better, blah, 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 all that sort of shit. So I think developers already don't target the bleeding edge hardware for that stuff. They instead probably look at it as like, this will be a nice bonus if you happen to have one of these cards. But like, it's not like this isn't DX13 coming out alongside this. This isn't a huge new generation of graphics tech coming along with the cards. It's really just, yeah, hey, it's going to run the ray tracing stuff better. And so maybe you get to a point where developers feel a little bit more comfortable spending a little bit more time on ray tracing, on those sorts of features, because more cards in general will be in the marketplace that can support them in some way. And for them, you know, they'll develop it up to a point and then like, yeah, turn it up to max and yeah, we'll bounce the reflections around a few more times if you want it, whatever. But also I think that this is not limited to the EVGA situation. It's not limited to like if you know, Nvidia overbought on 30 series cards and all that sort of stuff, that's all going to play a role. But it's kind of, think about it as more of, it's an exacerbated role that we already see because developers are often tethered to the set spec of a console. You know, that they're still thinking, you know, hey, this game still has to look great. Like, you know, what we really want to do is make sure that people who have a PlayStation 5 and an Xbox Series X and an Xbox Series S are having really good experiences with our games, because we can rest assured that, like, if you throw more horsepower at it than that, there are some bells and whistles you'll kind of get pseudo automatically. You know, yeah, you can run at higher resolution, of course. And we'll do high res textures because we have to generate them at that resolution anyway. And so, yeah, you'll get access to that because you'll have more VRAM to load it into or whatever. And so I think we're already seeing, you know, and this is, again, I think this is just how it's been for some time, is that you look at that kind of mainstream point of the console and you look at what the consoles can handle and you make sure that whatever you're making can run well there. And then, yeah, if you can make it look better on PC, if you're doing a simultaneous release, if you're doing a separate PC release, that's where Sony ends up, right? Where they're like, okay, like, yeah, now we're doing a PC port and we've got a team specifically devoted to that. And along the way, like, yeah, we don't have to, you know, we're kind of just taking advantage of the brute force power that the PC can have. But, you know, maybe we'll do little bits and pieces to make sure that this port is doing all the things that we need it to do, that we didn't necessarily need the PlayStation version to do. But if you're developing multi-platform, you're looking at the lowest common denominator and developing from there. This doesn't change that. This, if anything, this, you know, the consoles are always going to be that lowest common denominator. Unless you're in a situation where you're like, oh, actually, there's a massive PC market that is still on 10 series cards or 20 series cards. And so then you go like, okay, maybe we need to make sure our min spec addresses those consumers as well, even if that's technically below where the current consoles is. But generally, I think the guiding principle, as I understand it, is like, yeah, you aim at the current console, make sure it runs good. The Series S means that you have to make sure that you're targeting multiple specs anyway. And so from there, it's just how many different notches on the belt do you want? Do you want the fucking tighten the belt all the way, run this on a 980? Or do you want the, you know, like how far do you go? And that depends on a lot of factors. How much time do you have? What type of game are you making? What type of player is it likely to attract? All that sort of stuff. If you're making a game that's like, it's a hardcore game for hardcore gamers, then, you know, you can start to expect that they're going to have graphics cards in a certain range and you can spec accordingly. But, you know, whatever. At the end of the day, it's the consoles that drive that conversation. Brian from Nebraska writes in, and I was like you once, Brian, and I wish I was there again sometimes. I have gotten into my old video game consoles and heard from people to get the best picture on my TV, and heard from people to get the best picture on my TV. Problem is, I have no idea on anything beyond composite. Please, if you could, give me a rundown. What the hell is SCART? Composite video, and what is RGB? Ugh. Ryan. It's a disaster. SCART is basically a clean connection. It is used largely used in Europe, largely used in the United Kingdom, as I understand it, as a way to hook game consoles and cable boxes and all sorts of stuff up to a television. Back before HDMI was the standard. You had Euro SCART, and then you had a Japanese version of SCART, but it's basically the cleanest analog signal you can get. It basically is RGB. And Most US consoles are not set up to do it. In some cases, it's as easy as buying a cable, and then you have to then go buy the gear. This is where the retro tinks of the world come in, and some of these different scalers and the open source scan converter and stuff, where you are then taking the cleanest video out of your console, the single connection, all that sort of stuff. And ideally carrying RGB over that cable. And then plugging it into a device that then translates that into something that can be converted into HDMI. And then you're plugging that HDMI cable into your TV. And so in some ways, that's just the cleanest way to get a clean signal from an original console into a modern television. It's more of a connection standard than it is a quality standard, because you can have composite video, which is the lowest end, or one of the second lowest end, and looks like relative shit. You can carry composite video over a SCART connection, but the SCART connection is generally, these days, it is primarily used to carry a good RGB signal. And so it's a world of cable standards and converting connections from digital to, or from analog to digital. And in some cases, you're having to mod the consoles in order to get that signal out of them, to get that RGB signal out of them that you can then put into a SCART cable and carry out. And so, yeah, I ended up buying some of this stuff, and now I have a Saturn SCART cable, and I have a PC Engine Duo R that's been RGB modded that I can get SCART out of, and all that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, it's a big rabbit hole that you can go down if you want to, and if you don't want to go down that rabbit hole, you may have trouble hooking your consoles up to a modern television, because most of them don't have any other way other than HDMI these days, or RF maybe in some cases. I don't know. Yeah, I would go look at the open source scan converter, and I would go look at the RetroTink 5X Pro, and look at those things for a while, and decide if you want to really go down that rabbit hole. You may not want to, and that's okay. But sometimes it's kind of cool. Ben writes in and says, rumor has it that the release of the Advance Wars remaster is being delayed by Nintendo because of the ongoing war in Ukraine. I don't know if that's rumor, or I want to say they just came out and said that, right? Anyway. How do you feel about game companies being influenced by real world events like this? Does this seem like the correct response or an overreaction? I think at the time it seemed like a very normal reaction. At the time, it made a lot of sense, considering just I think as time has gone on, we're in this weird, and this, of course, this is going to happen, right? That as this thing drags on, people start to move on with their lives, and they forget that this thing is still happening. I try to read about how things are going in Ukraine every couple of days, but it does not dominate the headlines the way it did originally when it first started. When it first started, it was all anyone could talk about here in the States. Like, every top news story was about it. And then as the sanctions happened and all this other stuff, and now you're starting to see more stories about it again. As Ukraine pushes back, and as they start to, seemingly take back some territory and really take it to the Russian forces, you're starting to see the reporting become a little bit more prominent than maybe it was. And I don't look at every newspaper. I don't look at every headline. I'm just kind of saying, in a general sense, in my experience, those headlines have made their way back up the page. I think that, you kind of always have to be sensitive to real world events. It's the right thing to do. At the same time, I don't know enough about the content of the Advance Wars remaster to to really speak to it one way or the other, if it's an overreaction or not. You know, I'm tempted to say, like, after all this time, you know, maybe you could put it out. I don't know that anyone would, you know, I don't know that as many people would notice or care these days, which is sad in a sense, but you know what I mean. But also, yeah, the Grand Theft Auto 3, they ended up pushing it back very slightly because it had the Twin Towers in it, and 9/11 happened, and they ended up pushing it off. Yes, that's right. There was some stuff in Metal Gear Solid 2 that had to change as a result of that. That's sort of a different situation because that's like a landmark that had to be pulled out of a game. That Dreamcast game did get canceled. The Propeller Arena, I think it was called. Was that the game? Was it Propeller Arena? It wasn't Toy. What it was. Anyway, the plane game for the Dreamcast straight up got canceled, which, you know, that seems a little extreme. But also they were probably just looking for reasons to cancel Dreamcast games at that point. They were like, let's just get out of this as soon as we can. Let's just there was, what was it, the Spider-Man movie? They had to reshoot, they had to do some edits there or something like that. Yeah, there's a whole page of that stuff that is specifically about 9/11. But yeah, I don't know. Like, would anyone notice? You know, there was the thing with the Nintendo Direct where they didn't air it live in the UK because the Queen had just passed away, and they're like, what, why? And then it turns out that the Zelda game is subtitled Tears of the Kingdom, and you go like, yeah, I see why you might do this. Also, it's hard for me to have a real perspective on that because I'm like, who cares? Maybe that's a little harsh, but I'm just like, yeah, Tears of the Kingdom. Like, okay, sure. Like, you'll have some people making some memes. I don't know. It's not. And those are going to happen anyway. You know, did you truly honor her life by not airing that Nintendo Direct live? Did that, did anything really change there? The gesture is probably still appreciated in some corners, I suppose. The Advance Wars situation is a little bit different. Of course, the GoldenEye stuff was said to have been locked up in a similar state because of the story of GoldenEye and the characters and some of that other stuff. Like, I'm going to say it seemed like the correct response, but also I would say I don't think I would bat an eye if they suddenly started talking about Advance Wars again, even though obviously the situation in Ukraine is still ongoing. It's a little weird that they haven't given any updates on that, but I get that situation is still ongoing, and they did say that's why they were delaying it. So I don't know if now would they look like hypocrites if they said it before everything was over in there. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is there. I tend to be not very sentimental, and not when it comes to that sort of stuff. I don't stand on ceremony. It's never been my thing. So I don't think I would have been, again, not knowing what the content, if every bad guy in Advance Wars talks with an overtly Russian accent and they're fucking rolling tanks into places and doing stuff, I could see being like, ugh, this is maybe a little much. So I don't know the content. So if that ends up being the situation, then it continues to make a lot of sense. But I sort of just look at it as like, I don't think I would be the person to put it together if they started talking about it and it was like, oh, that's so callous. I don't think I would be that person, but I get why some people would. And again, I think it makes sense to just err on the side of just like, hey, this is a little fucked up to be doing, so let's just take a step back. And rethink this stuff a little bit, maybe approach it at a better time, all that sort of stuff. our cutesy tanks can roll on a different day, and when maybe people will be a little bit more receptive to that, as opposed to here's our fun time war game, which isn't going to play super well. That's going to do it for emails. Again, podcast@guard.bike is where you send those emails. I want to thank everyone for emailing in. Keep them coming. It's fun to read. It's fun to read. Reading, it's fundamental, and it's fundamental. Yeah, anyway, that's going to do it for the show. What else is going on? If you head over to the YouTube channel, the latest edition of my Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen playthrough is up and ready for you to view, if you so desire. The latest episode of Game Boys to Men will land later this week. I am thinking Thursday. I have to do some very light editing to it. And I believe that will hit on Thursday. I'm going to try for Wednesday, but I can't make any guarantees because I've got some other streams and other stuff going on. Also Thursday, I am going to go get my flu shot, and I am going to go get this this newest, latest. Yeah, I'm getting the 4090 of vaccines, of boosters, the latest and greatest. At the same time, so I will see how all that goes. I don't know. I have bounced back quite quickly from my previous booster shots and such. But if there's no stream on Friday, it's because that thing just suddenly kicked my ass for some weird reason. So I don't know. But I think probably I want to play some more Call of Duty when that beta opens back up for other platforms. So I am thinking if there's a Friday stream, then we will spend some more time with that beta on Friday. And then I am also looking to do some streams on Wednesday. I'm looking at other, maybe that'll be some Hyper Demon. What else? I've got some other things installed that I haven't done much with yet. Metal Hellsinger, which I've heard good things about. A game, well, I need to check and see if I can. When is Moon Scars out? I have a copy of Moon Scars, but okay, that's not out for a little bit, so maybe I cannot stream any of that at this time. But yeah, a handful of things that maybe we'll check out on Wednesday, and then maybe we'll get into this Call of Duty beta on Friday. Or maybe by then the moment will have passed, and I'll be like, you know what, I don't want to do Call of Duty. I'll do something else, and we'll figure something else out. We'll keep it a little bit fluid, but I'll let you know on Twitter and on the internet, on the various spots on the internet. Head over to dopeassvideogames.com for more information about the Patreon. When you join that Patreon, you can hop on the Discord, where we're over there talking about games and anime and wrestling. The holy trinity of video game content: anime, wrestling, and video games. The future is now. Join up today, patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann or dopeassvideogames.com. Love y'all. See you next week for the podcast. All that sort of shit. Take care of yourselves, and I'll be back soon. I always forget to hit the music. I should have the music play me out. I should be like, oh, I'm finishing the show as the music is finishing. And I could lay that on in post, but honestly, I don't want to lie to you here live. And also I would probably not do the work to put it on the video version of the show, because then I would have to re-render a bunch of stuff. And see, if I had a 4090, all that rendering is going to happen so much faster. I could start re-rendering the whole episode instead of just updating the audio and not touching the video. Right now I just use lossless cut to just trim stuff out on keyframes. It's the most bootsy, half-assed editing process in the world, but it means I don't have to re-edit the video and re-render the video and lose a generation of quality along the way. If I had a 4090, man, I could put all those CUDA cores at it. I could go pay for a legitimate copy of Premiere.